We are now coming out of recess at 9:22 a.m. I will now ask the school board attorney to explain the rules of this public workshop.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. This work session is a public meeting as defined in Florida's Sunshine Law. The board is dedicated to full transparency in its meeting and its work. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board has adopted uniform meeting procedures, including the right for citizens to participate. The board will allow public comment regarding any work session item listed on today's agenda at the appropriate time. Speakers must fill out a request form located in the lobby and hand it to the board clerk. After the board and superintendent have completed their discussion on a particular agenda item, the board clerk will call speakers' names in the order received. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. As required by the Sunshine Law, the board must maintain orderly conduct and proper decorum throughout this meeting. Speakers may criticize subject matter and decisions in a respectful manner, but not people. Finally, speakers must be careful not to violate the privacy rights of others, especially students and their family members, by mentioning their names or other identifying information. Thank you for your attention to these important rules.
Thank you, Attorney Powers. Ms. Martinez, can you please provide the proof of publication for today's meeting? Good morning.
Good morning. The notice for the September 7th, 2023 work session was published in the Ocala Gazette on August 25th, 2023. Proof of publication has been attached to board docs under proof of publication.
Thank you. We will now begin today's work session with the superintendent's administrative briefing. Good morning again, Dr. Gullett.
Good morning again, board. Pleased to be able to kick off our annual review of our strategic plan updates today. As you see, we will start with goal 1, which is the core of our work, student success, and all of the other goals support student success. So I'm pleased to again bring this forward and look forward to discussion, but a reminder to the board and to the public that we do this throughout the year. We provide these updates. We are very diligent and committed to the strategic plan, not just being a plan on paper, but a work of action and something that we measure to look at not just what our outputs are, but what our outcomes are. So again, pleased to provide some context and public discussion of the work that we're doing for students every day. So without any delay, if I could, I'll introduce the item. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to introduce our Deputy Superintendent who oversees all of our academic services, Ms. Talbert Irving, who will kick off Goal 1 updates this morning. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Chair Campbell, board members, and Superintendent Gullett. Marion County Public Schools continues to be committed to our district's strategic plan, Achieve 2026. It is important to note the plan outlines the goals and strategies that serve as the North Star for the district. The curriculum and instruction departments review the district's strategic plan frequently to ensure we are monitoring the goals and strategies for improvement. We continue to examine qualitative and quantitative data with specific actionable and measurable outcomes. We value the importance of monitoring for impact, teamwork, and collaboration as we continue to eliminate silos and involve all stakeholders, from district staff to parents, teachers, and administrators, to reach our target for 2026. As a refresher, 5 pillars serve as our goals. Goal 1, student success. Goal 2, safe and positive learning and working environment. Goal 3, talent management. Goal 4, fiscal and operational efficiency. Goal 5, community engagement and communications. Today, we will provide updates on Goal 1, which is student success. I will now turn it over to the team to give an update on our progress for Goal 1.
Good morning. We'd like to start by sharing the outcome metrics that were approved for Goal 1 and where we finished the year for 22-23. So I'll orient you again to the chart here on the outcome metrics. The far left data column is our baseline data, which is from the 2020-21 school year. And then the shaded column there in the middle is our target of where we're trying to achieve by 2026. So for 2023, as you all know, we switched over to the FAST assessment for ELA and math, so as a baseline year for us. And so because it's a baseline year, learning gains will not be calculated, so we will not be able to complete that. We're also waiting on the October 18th State Board of Education meeting where they'll approve the new cut scores for the FAST assessment so that we can actually give you an accurate measurement of where we finished last year for proficiency for both ELA and math. We do, however, have our science data from last year, which you'll see an improvement in all areas in science for 2023. Our social studies data, where we saw an increase in our U.S. history end of course assessment scores, and an increase in our middle school acceleration, which measures student participation in high school courses like Algebra 1 or geometry, and also their ability to complete industry certifications, high school level industry certifications in middle school. The graduation scores and the high school acceleration scores are lagging data, so as a reminder, this, even though it's featured in 22-23 and will be a part of the district grade for 22-23, it's actually the graduating class of 2022 that earned that acceleration and graduation score. So even though we don't have learning gains, I think it is good to look at the progress that we made last year with our FAST. So you can see for ELA where we started the year last year at the beginning with Progress Monitoring Window 1, which is right at the beginning of the year. The percent of our students in grades 3 through 10 that were reading on grade level at the start of the year, and then the jump that we made by the end of the year to PM3 with the percent of students reading on grade level. You'll also see with math the increase that we had from the Progress Monitoring 1 window at the beginning of the year in math, grades 3 through 8, and where we finished the year with almost a 40-point gain in math. So certainly glad to see that growth from those scores.
All right, good morning, everybody. So we're going to talk about strategy A, which is strengthening our core instruction, our tier 1 instruction, with an emphasis on literacy. So we know that we need to have the same expectations across our district when it comes to what does highly effective tier 1 instruction looks like. We need to make sure that everybody has that consistent message and that we're all identifying and looking for the same things and the same trends across the district and across all of our school-based teams. So we wanted to identify what is it exactly that we're looking for. So we've laid out a professional learning plan that really begins with our school-based administrators so that we can help build capacity in all of our leadership team members at each and every school. So what are we looking for when it comes to high quality tier 1 instruction? So our team has planned out 9 professional learning sessions throughout the school year that will focus on what tier 1 instruction looks like in theory, but also what it looks like inside and outside of the classroom as well. So we're looking at topics such as, is the curriculum aligned to the benchmarks? Is the instruction and the task that the students are doing all aligned to the state standards and to our benchmarks? Is the instruction rigorous enough in all of our classrooms? And does it meet the needs, and are we reaching all of our learners? So some of our topics in those sessions include student engagement. We look at how teachers are using assessment in their instruction, how they're using statewide assessment, district assessment data, and in-classroom assessment data as well. How are teachers providing feedback to those students? Are they reaching all of their learners? So those are just a few of the topics that we're working on this year. That's going to start at our principal meetings. We started this back in July. So it begins with the school principal, and then the training also is implemented throughout our assistant principal meetings, and there are 9 of those as well this year. We also understand that we have to build capacity in the people who are working directly with our teachers, and those are the coaches, the curriculum coaches within the schools, the ELA, math, and science coaches. So the same content will be presented to those coaches. Something we've added this year is we're diving into the curriculum a little bit more when it comes to laying out what highly effective instruction looks like. We're bringing in that curriculum piece so that we know specifically what we're looking for in those classrooms at those meetings, and then we do come back and debrief and craft some feedback that we would want to provide teachers. We also know that it doesn't end with the coaches, so we need to make sure that the curriculum department specifically is directly impacting teachers, because it is our job along with the school administrators to share best practices and make sure that our teachers are equipped and that they know where to find the curriculum resources, and not only that, but how to use those curriculum resources. So last year we brought in 60 impact teachers in elementary alone. Secondary also brought in a lot of impact teachers as well, and they planned across content areas. But we brought in 60 elementary teachers across 18 sessions last year, morning and afternoon, to go over how to find the curriculum resources and how to implement those in the classroom. The goal then was for those teachers to go back to their school sites and meet with their K-2 teachers and 3-5 teachers, because again, we wanted to make sure we were impacting all stakeholders at the school level. Another way that we are building capacity in our schools as well is we have 6 program specialists in our department that are pushed out to specific targeted schools. Last year, we supported 6 schools consistently, with also sprinkling in some additional support that was requested by other schools. We had, you can see on the chart there, that we were able to sit in and help facilitate 184 collaborative planning sessions last year. That would be reviewing curriculum maps and lesson plans with coaches and grade level teams. We had 70 visits assisting with specific content areas, reading, math, or English language arts, math, and science. And 57 visits building capacity in teachers and coaches by either side-by-side coaching, modeling for teachers, or just sort of helping them with best practices and incorporating that curriculum. In addition, each school developed a school-based professional learning plan to impact teachers. And they designed those around their school improvement goals. So they took their goals and then they kind of laid out what their professional learning would look like throughout the year. They did have to turn those in. They're lucky because they have those early release days this year built in so that they can deliver some of that professional learning. And then much of the professional learning also takes place in after-school professional learning sessions or sometimes during the day through the collaborative planning session. One of our goals in our administrator meetings is that we give the administrators something they can take back to their campus and implement the very next day. We're also very excited that we continue to use the University of Florida Literacy Institute phonics program. It's known as UFly because we know that our K through 2 students need that explicit systematic phonics instruction to help them improve their foundational skills before they get to 3rd grade. So this is year 2 of implementation. All of our teachers new to kindergarten, 1st or 2nd grade received training that week before school started, and any teacher who needed a refresher also had that opportunity as well, because we know that the fidelity of this program is going to be key, and that we know we're going to see some excellent results in those students as they move through those grade levels. I included some data on the next slide that we just pulled out, highlighting a few schools here, just to show you the difference between the first STAR early literacy assessment to the last early literacy assessment as well.
All right, and then good morning. And then in addition to strengthening our Core 1 instruction, it's vitally important the work that we are doing in our VPK programs. We utilize 2 very specific programs in our VPK programs, one being Frog Street Pre-K curriculum, which definitely focuses on developing kindergarten readiness and then supporting the needs of students through whole and small group structured teaching. And then a new resource that was purchased last year is Heggerty Phonemic Awareness Curriculum. So we started last year with some training on that program. Teachers began to get going on that program during the second half of the year. But this year we have moved full steam ahead. And Heggerty is a excellent program, 15 minutes out of the teacher's day, building phonological and phonemic awareness, which is so vitally important to help develop those pre-reading skills, because if you can manipulate those sounds and those words through spoken language, then again, you can make that transition as you're transitioning over to reading those words. And so these are just two of the very specific programs that we are utilizing in VPK that are really creating a structured, academically focused period of time to strengthen Tier 1 instruction.
Good morning. Teachers use a variety of assessments to drive instruction, from common assessments across a grade level to DPMA data to FAST data to drive instruction. We also have benchmark assessments available for ELA and math for more frequent checks. The student assessment team facilitated training this summer for teachers on how to utilize assessments to inform instruction. Teachers are now using the summer learning to help drive instructional decisions to improve student outcomes. For our benchmark assessments, 99% of our schools utilize the benchmark assessments to track student progress towards mastery of benchmarks. We have also added 5th grade science this year as an option.
Area superintendents and senior executive directors have worked with the student assessment department to support data chats with school-based leadership teams where we have discussed specific student subgroups and their academic data. We have been able to problem solve and drill down during the data chats and create action plans to improve student academic proficiency. Based on data, schools have been identified and will receive up to 3 instructional reviews for the 23-24 school year, along with weekly or bi-monthly visits from each area superintendent and senior executive director to monitor and support instruction with our students in our classrooms. Currently, we have completed 20 of the fall instructional reviews at our schools.
All right, so you all have heard me share a few times about our new data dashboard that we have developed that we're rolling out for our staff, and we're excited for the continued growth of this dashboard. You can see right now we're averaging about 6,500 views per month on the dashboard, which is incredible. A lot of those are probably mine, but we are actually seeing over 1,000 unique users each month accessing the dashboard. So certainly school-based personnel, school-based administrators, also a lot of usage from our attendance specialists, our school psychologists, and our curriculum and discipline teams. But the dashboard is giving our staff access to a lot of relevant and useful year-over-year comparison data. So you'll see in that first image there, you can see what a year-over-year comparison chart looks like, and it actually tracks data like attendance and discipline on a weekly basis. So we can see week by week from school year to school year how we're improving in the data that we're seeing. And it also lets our administrators start to figure out where are we tending to see spikes or dips in our data on a yearly basis, so they can try to problem solve and get out ahead of those typical spikes and dips. You'll also see in that next chart chronic absenteeism. So this is something obviously we are watching very carefully and is a big part of Goal 2. So this dashboard not only lets us see our students that are chronically absent, but also students that are approaching chronic absenteeism and trending there, so that we can find those students that are just starting to get on the radar and intervene quickly before they end up in that chronic absenteeism status. So very useful data for our administrators and our district staff to access. The last one on there is another really great feature of the dashboard. That's a geospatial heat map. And so our administrators can see not only where students that attend their school are physically located within the school district, but it also lets us pinpoint chronic absenteeism down to a location. So we can see using that map if we have a cluster of students in one particular neighborhood that are chronically absent, and we can then look at how do we provide community outreach, not just addressing things in the school, but how do we partner with those communities now that we know where we're seeing trends in chronic absenteeism to try and head those problems off. So a lot of great opportunities. We started this in February, rolling this out to our administrators, and got great feedback from them. We're able to customize the dashboard more based on some of the things that they would like to see. This summer, we did a train-the-trainer model, so we had each school send 2 instructional staff from their school this summer to be trained, and got some great feedback from the teachers as well as some of the things that they would like to see. And so as we get that feedback, we continue to customize the dashboard. We've actually just rolled out at the start of this year a graduation tracker for our high schools. So our high school administrators now can track their graduation cohorts starting freshman year and see the percent of their students in each cohort that are currently on or off track and be able to develop interventions early on starting in freshman year for those students. And we are working right now to get our risk analysis dashboard rolled out, which will allow our schools to identify early warning indicators and be able to track a variety of early warning indicators in students from elementary school all the way up through high school. And then eventually our last step will be adding a post-graduation dashboard utilizing the National Student Clearinghouse data, which will allow our high schools to see how their students perform beyond high school. When they get into colleges, wherever they may go, the percent of our students that are seeing success within a year after high school enrolled in a post-secondary institution, or within 2 years, or completing a degree after they leave our institution. So some great data and some great opportunities for our staff to use that data for the benefit of our students.
Strategy C is to engage all students in rigorous grade level content through differentiated instruction. And engage is one of the key words in this particular strategy. So one of the key activities that we are focusing on to engage those students is through Universal Design for Learning, otherwise called UDL. And UDL is a framework that focuses on the why, the what, and the how of learning. It provides opportunities for teachers to select different ways that they can engage students, represent the curriculum for students, and then have students have particular actions and expressions with the learning content that teachers are presenting. Last year, we had 10 schools participate in a UDL book study as one of our first steps towards incorporating UDL into our classrooms. We also engaged, worked with fiddlers, and we trained 300 teachers in UDL strategies. The goal is to identify out of these 10 schools if there is an opportunity to maybe identify some classrooms that might become some model classrooms for UDL. And so that's our next level of work for UDL. We also worked with the Elementary Curriculum and Instruction Department, and we incorporated UDL strategies into the lesson plans. Another key activity before we can engage students is we have to actually identify students that need some opportunities for differentiation. And so last year, we participated, 10 schools participated in a universal screening for second graders at those 10 schools to see if they would be eligible for further gifted evaluation. The 10 schools, you can see those listed on the screen. This coming school year, we will be screening all second graders to see if they are eligible for further gifted evaluation. Last year, we screened 1,049 students, and 181 of those students, so 17.25%, were recommended for further gifted evaluation. Another key activity to engage students in rigorous grade level content is to provide opportunities for co-teach models at schools. Co-teach model is a model of inclusion for classrooms where students are supported by 2 teachers in the classroom. One of them would be a gen ed teacher certified in that content area, and the other would be a teacher certified in exceptional student education. Last year, we began the co-teach training for teachers, and this year, we're continuing that training. So for teachers that have participated and engaged in the professional learning last year, we're offering a 2.0 co-teach training for those to further expand and develop their capacity in co-teaching. And we've had a total so far between last year and some opportunities that were also offered over the summer. We've engaged 190 teachers in co-teaching training, and then 38 administrators so far. to show you kind of a picture of what the data is showing for some of our co-teach student achievement scores, we went ahead, I worked with Mr. Whitehouse on this, and so this particular data that you see on this slide is a representation of some student achievement scores from Hammett Bowen that did participate in the co-teach model from last year. So this shows you that students that were in the Exceptional Student Education Program had a 22 average increase in ELA from PM1 to PM3 compared to Exceptional Student Education students that were not in the co-teach model. They had an average increase of 12 points. And then you can see the similar data on the right side in the math gains. So students in the Exceptional Student Education students in the co-teach model had an average of 29 points compared to students in the non-co-teach model who are also ESE students, and they had a gain of an average of 25 points.
The English language learners benefit from exposure to rigorous grade level content through differentiated instruction. The ESOL team has developed a full-day professional learning opportunity to provide teachers with practical strategies for making content comprehensible. Teachers engage with interactive strategies designed to teach how to scaffold instruction, promote oral language development, and design formative assessments specifically for English language learners. The ESOL team will continue to collaborate with both curriculum teams to increase the expertise of content area specialists and impact teachers as it relates to designing, implementing, and monitoring lessons for English language learners. The ESOL resource facilitators, or district-level teachers in the ESOL program, will layer compliance support by providing small group professional learning to schools. Supplemental funding has allowed the school district to purchase programs to strengthen English language learners' understanding of academic content, critical thinking, and the use of English simultaneously. Imagine Learning and Literacy is used with emerging bilinguals in elementary settings. The program is uniquely designed to introduce the content in the student's heritage language and then gradually transitions into English to support language acquisition. This school year, English language learners will have a dichotomous option for all L's in secondary settings. Lexia English Language Development is an adaptive blended learning program that supports emergent bilinguals through academic language. The program integrates speaking, listening, and grammar into subjects of math, science, social studies, and general knowledge. Lexia Power Up accelerates literacy gains for students in grades 6 through 12 who are at risk of not meeting state standards. On the next slide, the data before you reflects a positive trend for our English language learners. As you know, within the ESOL population, there are many levels of English proficiency. The population is fluid, meaning that there is a continuous cycle of accepting students into the ESOL program based on eligibility and exiting Ls that have acquired the language. The data represents a gradual trend that represents a decrease in English language learners scoring at level 1 from Progress Monitoring 1 to Progress Monitoring 2. And then you will also see level 2s increase from 17% to 23%, level 3s increase from 5% to 11% of our population, level 4 increase from 1% to 4%, and then level 5 beginning the year at a fraction of a percent to 1%.
Good morning. I don't know if you guys wanted to see that for a second. So part of Strategy C also includes our multi-tiered system of supports. So I'm going to cover a couple of our key components of MTSS. and then talk about some data. First off, academic and behavior is addressed with MTSS on the academic side. Our tiered interventions for English language arts and for math. Our teams identify school areas to be addressed. Reading interventions are selected based on area and the level of intensity of intervention that is needed. Math interventions target skills as aligned to our benchmarks. With our grade level decision trees, this is newly developed for our K-5 teams, and this guides the team through problem analysis for intervention planning. The flowchart helps teams determine if the intervention is even warranted and what additional data may be needed to identify the type of intervention that's needed and the level of need. Our language and reading continuum guides teams through intervention selection and progress monitoring. So this provides a list of district-supported interventions grouped by skill area and providing guidance on data sources that are also referenced on that decision tree. Our screening tool, so there were additional screening measures that were provided along with checkpoints to ensure that the intervention that is implemented is appropriate and it actually targets the type and level of need that was identified. Checkpoints help us make quicker and better decisions on a need for a change in intervention. These are also referenced on that grade level decision tree. And then multiple sources of data. We know we use multiple sources of data to make good decisions for our students. However, what I wanted to highlight was the partnership between our departments. So we rely very heavily on the expertise and resources provided by student assessment and curriculum and instruction. From them, we get information about the interventions and the progress monitoring. We also understand where to find the information on our data dashboard, how to interpret some of those scores that we can use for peer comparisons. With regard to behavior, we start with our core, which is our resiliency curriculum. Our Tier 1 curriculum for elementary is Caring School Community, and for secondary is Habitudes. These curricula help students acquire the skills and habits necessary for success in school and beyond. This month, we'll be focusing on perseverance. Next up are grit and gratitude, responsibility, and critical thinking. Tier 1 behavior is also addressed along with our resiliency curriculum. All schools have developed a school-wide behavior expectation plan for their campus and includes key components such as teaching expectations, so students know what we're expecting to see. Having teams do some of our problem solving, so we have lots of perspectives and ideas for problem solving, and data analysis for decision making. The district support that's provided includes coaching and training as needed. Our behavior observation tool, the Behavior and Emotional Screening System, otherwise known as the BESS, is used as a universal screener for all elementary and select middle schools to help identify trends, whether it be across the school, grade levels, classrooms, groups of students, as well as individual students in need of support. Best screeners at the secondary level are by referral and are completed by the students themselves as a self-report. Our behavior intervention continuum is very similar to our language and reading continuum, as it's a list of district-supported interventions, and they're grouped by area of need. For example, social skills, performance or motivation, self-regulation and impulse control, things like that. It provides a list of interventions, the associated progress monitoring of those interventions, and criteria data sources that you can use to guide selection of them, as well as dismissal or fading of the interventions. Our multidisciplinary teams are the core of our schools. These teams are analyzing and synthesizing all the data and information of the multiple sources described. They identify needs and guide the level of support that may be needed. The teams also determine the appropriate route for support. For example, whether it be mental health supports, whether they're referring the student to a problem-solving team, or they think it should be addressed in an IEP if the student should have one. So next, we're going to look at some academic data. This data shows the percentage of students scoring level 1 on PM1 versus PM3. So you can see that there was a significant decrease in the number of students that remained at a level 1 following Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. Specifically in ELA, it went from 73% to 47%, and in math, from 91% to 43%. Next up, we know that some students continue to struggle and so need some additional support. So our problem-solving teams work collaboratively using multiple sources of data to identify areas of need, select appropriate intervention, and then monitor the student's response to that intervention. Students who do not demonstrate sufficient progress to indicate that they're closing the achievement gap, or who show the need for sustained intensive interventions to continue to make progress, are referred for evaluation to further assess needs and support consideration of exceptional student education services. Our referral information for the past 2 years, so we see that there was an increase from the 2020 school year to the 2021 school year, which was likely due to impacts from school closures. We also saw an increase in parent requests during that evaluation year. The following year, we focused on implementing new interventions and analyzing progress monitoring data, and we saw a 38% decrease in the number of initial referrals. So on average, we typically receive reports of about 30 to 40 problem-solving team meetings per school per year, and that varies based on the size of the school and the needs of the school. With our behavior data, BEST data for the spring showed 16% of students were within the elevated range, while 10% fell within the extremely elevated range, indicating that behaviors that were observed were occurring at a rate and/or intensity that exceed what is expected for peers. And that stayed consistent through both years. However, we saw that there was an increase in the number of multidisciplinary team referrals from 21 to 22, which we attribute to the teams improving their familiarity and their consistency with our mental health plan framework and the process. With lots of MDT coaching and support, schools have improved their systems, and in turn, they've had a better, they've been able to identify needs more quickly and accurately to get the students the help that they need a lot faster. Additional data indicated that 1,328 students received in-school interventions, and 366 students were recommended for interventions outside the school system.
All right, our next strategy is to expand access to high-quality early childhood opportunities, and we have certainly continued to do that because we know that when we provide these opportunities to young children and families, that the more that we can do to get them prepared for kindergarten, we are setting them off on a pathway towards success. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is Fordham Early Learning Academy. We continue to grow and thrive, and with that, we have continued to add to our program there, and so we have added a pre-K3 program this year, and we have added a early childhood, a VPK program there. In addition to that, we also have continued to really maximize our seats that we have available in VPK. We have 43 classrooms or units this year, and currently we have 720 students participating. And so that gives us a full house, but as seats become available, certainly we look to waiting lists to make sure that we are maximizing that program for all students within our community. And then finally, one of the things that I am most excited about is in the spring of last year, it was really a dream of ours to really tighten up on the instruction being provided in our VPK classrooms. We brought together our early learning coaches, we brought together teachers this summer. Not only did we write supplemental lesson plans with some resources that were purchased, one of the things that the team laid out was they laid out weekly lesson plans covering all of the developmental standards for our VPK programs. It goes out each and every week in 2-week increments to our VPK teachers, and then our coaches are on site then supporting those teachers in the classroom. And really that speaks to where we're leading in VPK, which is with standards in mind and making sure that we have a standards first focused in both planning and instruction. All right, and then to share with you just another couple of numbers connected to Fordham, and again, I can't help but be proud about the work that's going on at Fordham. So last year for our VPK count, we had 35 students participating. This year, we are at 49 students, and that does include our pre-K 3 program. So currently, we have 14 2- and 3-year-olds in our program, and I will say it was the sweetest thing. I went in there the other day doing a wonderful circle time activity, and one of our students raised his hand, and the teacher was talking about what the day was, and it was September 5th, and he said 5, and I thought, that's what it's all about. We are making an impact with even our youngest students. And then our total count has grown this year. Last year, we had 46 amazing students, and this year we have grown to 136 amazing students, and so we have added 90 students to our program. And as I have said to the parents, we are getting into the groove. Students are learning where to go. They are learning procedures and routines, and they are getting into the instruction. All right.
Good morning. We are going to provide some information on Strategy E, which is supporting students' readiness and success in post-secondary opportunities. And as you know, we're excited about adding the fourth one. So we're focused on the employment, enlistment, enrollment, and entrepreneurship opportunities. So I'd like to share with you what Zello is. Zello is Florida's official K-12 career planning and work-based learning platform. And so this is brand new, and we have our first official training on September 14th with our school counselors. And this is a collaborative effort between the Career and Technical Education Department and Mental Health with the school counselors. So we're excited about that. I want to share a few things about Zello. Students will be the center of their own planning experience for college and career exploration. During the journey, they will build self-knowledge, explore post-secondary opportunities and options, and create their own plans. And then they will be able to constantly reassess their plans as they build new knowledge and explore different opportunities about their paths. So we are excited about Zello, so be prepared to hear quite a bit of information from your own students and students in our community about Zello. Go ahead.
Okay. All right, and just to give you an update on career dual enrollment and technical education, last year when we look at the data, we had an increase of 23% of certifications earned at our schools through students' assessments. We had an increase of 421 attempts on certifications as well. And we continue to work with our local organizations, partnerships, and businesses to continue to build opportunities for career dual enrollment and technical education. We currently, as you know, have the Optimum RV agreement, and so that provides an opportunity for 10 students from Bellevue High School to gain experience and on-the-job training in that field. We also are continuing our work with the Equine Partnership and growing that, and so we're expanding that to include K-12 opportunities with them as well. This is a collaborative effort between the equine and elementary and secondary curriculum and instruction departments. And then last, we have our Aviation Academy at SPAR. That's providing our K-5 students with opportunities to explore aviation careers and opportunities that eventually feeds also into North Marion Middle School and North Marion High School.
Thank you, team. I thank you all for your hard work, and you're representing so many of the wonderful staff members and teachers and administrators we have in the field at our schools every day. Board, I want to make a couple of comments, if I could, before we open it up for some feedback. First being, I say this a lot to a lot of community groups I speak with, but graduation begins with early learning. And as you know, we've talked about confronting our reality from the beginning when we created the strategic plan, focused on having really low kindergarten readiness data in Marion County, and we needed to start there as we're also looking at the upper grades and graduation rates. and our core fundamental foundational skills in English language arts, reading, literacy, mathematics, science, and so forth. But it begins in the early learning years. So really proud of the work of all of our team members out there that are understanding and committed to core foundational Tier 1 instruction starting at the very beginning. We know, and I do believe that data is going to continue to show us that as we accelerate the work for those students coming and starting instruction with us, they're going to be more proficient. We also know that data is going to show in their third grade scores, which again, we've talked about recently. We typically could see that in the early grades. When they struggle, we know what they're going to look like in third grade if we don't intervene earlier. The other piece that's really important to mention as we started this presentation about the data, we know that the state, the Florida Department of Education, has announced cut scores, but we don't know what the interpretation of those cut scores are going to be yet for our data. So as soon as we have that back, we anticipate October, November, we will be bringing back to the board a lot more data as we've always typically done. So you'll see a lot more of a deep dive into all of those foundational measures and how our students performed. So a lot more to come on that, but this is what we have right now. And again, the work of the systems, if you think about this being high level, we could talk about this all day long, every day in detail, but if you look at the well-rounded nature of the work we're doing to reach every student with mental health, support services, core instruction, systems, data to inform instruction, it takes all of those pieces moving together simultaneously to work. Having been at the principals meetings this week and listening and seeing the evolution of that work and how it's translating and sitting in on collaborative planning, how that's translating to instruction is very powerful. I'm very proud of everyone out there who's doing all of the great work. So look forward to your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett. So this is a lot of information to digest. Boredom, because we let them do the entire presentation and not interrupt them throughout. I know that helps their flow. But if it pleases the board, I would actually like us to kind of start and just say, I have questions on slide 2. Anybody have another question, something like that? So we can just take the entire presentation throughout rather than each one of us individually asking our set of questions. Would that be okay with you all, or would you like to individually ask your set of questions?
I just have questions for 2 people, so I don't know that mine are on a couple different slides, but it's 2 individuals, so I'll go with whatever the board wants to do.
Okay. We can go that way then, if that's better with everybody, or I know my first questions were on slide 2. I don't know who's going to address my question. How about I ask that question and then we'll see where we go from there. So my question on slide 2, starting with the very beginning of our strategic plan, we know what our baseline is, we know what our targets are, we know where the data is moving along. The one most disconcerting line here that we didn't talk much about is the very last one, where our baseline is, where our target is, and where our graduation rates have decreased and declined year over year since we set that baseline. What is our strategy, and would you like to address that, Mr. Whitehouse?
Sure. So I'll probably make this a collaborative effort with Dr. Livingood, so she can talk about the strategies this year. But one thing to point out when we look at the graduation data, we know each year we had struggles with students who lost a lot of instructional time due to COVID. And at the same time, the state also increased the concordant and comparative scores that were used to meet the graduation test requirements for ELA and math, which made it even harder for our students than it had been in prior years to meet those scores. And so the state had to intervene each year and reduce those scores back, provide alternative methods for students to meet those assessment needs because it was impacting us statewide. And so I think some of that contributes to some of the dips in the numbers that we see across the district. But I'll certainly let Dr. Livingood talk about some of the strategies for this year to try and combat that as we move forward.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Whitehouse. So as you know, we are focused right now during the fall on capturing as many retake assessments as possible. This is our first step in the process. We have Many students at the schools that have been unsuccessful for whatever reason during that 10th grade graduation test, that's required to graduate. And so the priority right now is to make sure all of those students are sitting and are coming to school for this September-October assessment. And then from there, we open up the school day SAT, ACT assessments that the students will take as concordant options. In addition to that, the schools are focused on the students that have below a 2.0 GPA, and not just our current seniors, but all the way from the sophomore class that are already below a 2.0, showing that they have been unsuccessful with coursework, making sure that they have the appropriate schedules so they are taking the credit recovery options right now and not waiting till that senior year spring semester to capture those credits. But I can answer any more specific if you want, but that's our immediate plan, is the testing and then to identify which students we need to do more work with in the spring.
Thank you, Dr. Livingood, for addressing that, and Mr. Whitehouse as well. It is a little unnerving. I understand the challenges that we've experienced, and I know people don't like to blame COVID, but it was impactful, specifically for those high school students that were just getting started, and high school credits look very different than every other thing they've ever done. And so I understand that while we don't want to use it as an excuse, it actually is a part of the justification for that. I also know that this board, at least a part of our recommendations, not that we're actually sending to the legislature next Wednesday, but a part of the recommendations that we're putting forth potentially for the Florida School Board Association strategy is to eliminate the testing and all of that for graduation, the high stakes testing specifically for that they have to pass the test in addition to the class, in addition to et cetera, et cetera. And so at least to have those conversations, I think it warrants that, especially with the legislature understanding and the DOE understanding what they've had to do to adjust down what their overall expectation was. But as we move forward, looking at this slide as a whole again, understanding that the majority of these we are making some movement on, but we do only have a couple of years to reach those targets. I know we're continuing to implement strategies to try to impact these numbers. Are there, and this is not a question for you necessarily, Dr. Livingood, it's just a general question about this slide. Are there areas of concern that and maybe this is a Dr. Gullett question, are there areas of concern with the targets that we've set? I mean, obviously we have some that we know, but where do we see the strongest area of concern from our baseline to potentially not meeting that target in 2026?
I think it's a great question, Madam Chair. What this represents is a high-level data, but what you don't see behind the scene is the very specific school-by-school, grade-level-by-grade-level data that we look at. And I was even just thinking about recent conversation I had with Dr. Livingood with regard to graduation, but others as well. I would say that some of the concerns are in pockets, and that's what you heard described is what the work is that's happening in the schools. There are very specific action items and plans that are very laser focused in those pockets. And that's how we take a transformative approach to improving student outcomes. It's not as broad as it seems, it's very detailed, and it's tracking to each child. So when you see the dashboard, the answer is it's specific in certain areas, certain schools, certain pockets. And we not only look at the student performance, we look at the teachers that they have, we look at the classes that we're taking. So kind of describe it as slicing and dicing it all different ways as we look at data and looking at what are the patterns that we're seeing so we can address them. And I can say with pretty good certainty, we see where the patterns are. And that's what the team's focus is. That's what we're all focused on, how to address those pockets. And there are some areas that there are students that are thriving and they're being very successful. And we're going to exceed some of those goals. I use the word exceed cautiously because I was asked recently about our numbers. And I said, until we're 100%, the goal is 100%, to be clear. I know we've had this conversation before about the strategic plan. The goal is 100%. but we have to create steps to getting to every child. But those are that's the work we do every day. It's not one broad category. I mean, you see some areas where we've seen improvement in core areas, but then you see pockets in science and other areas that we have to address. Foundational, yes, still have a lot of work to do.
Thank you. So kicking off the discussion there, I think it probably would be best for us then each individually to ask our specific questions. I have probably about 5 more, but Dr. James, you said you had 2.
Well, I just wanted to speak to this point for a second, just from my educational perspective. I think it's really important to reiterate what Dr. Gullett said, which is the importance in early education. By the time a child gets to freshman year of high school, if they are in a reading course, they have statistically, and Mr. Whitehouse with the very big math brain down there can confirm, but statistically, that child has probably failed the ELA reading test from 3rd grade until 9th grade, which is the grade that they're in. They have been in some level of a double reading block. They have been in remediation every single year since 3rd grade. That is what the statistics shows. So while I can totally appreciate that this is a 5-year strategic plan, and I think that I was not on the board when this goal was set, but I would say that in the midst of COVID, increasing graduation rate, when we are dealing with the lack of face-to-face instruction for this group of kids, which is now showing right here, it is daunting. And so I believe that while we are going to do our best to continue to meet kids where they are and grow them in high school, what Ms. Beck is doing, and as a district, what we are doing throughout 43 different units and starting in VPK and growing these students, I believe that starting this year, we will see the 3rd grade data to show improvement, which will then continue to show. But education is a long game. If it was a 5-year game, it would be so easy, but it's not, because the improvements and the changes we make for pre-K students isn't going to come to fruition for 4 years in 3rd grade. And then the goal is to stay consistent and continue to do exactly what we're doing every day to grow them to be high school graduates. So I just want to stress that, yes, I'm not happy with that number. I'm not happy with that number at all. There is only so much as a school that we can do in the high school. It's a full team effort, pre-K through age 12 or grade 12. And I just wanted to stress that point that Dr. Gullett made because it has a lot of value.
Thank you, Dr. James. And again, I'll highlight what this board's legislative priority is. One of our top 5 legislative priorities is to request that the legislature lower the age range for kindergarten requirement to no longer be 6 by, the September of whatever school year, but we're asking that they lower that age to 5, understanding that data is showing early education is the most important. And everything else the legislature has done with funding VPK and the interest for 4-year-olds, I'm not sure why they didn't just align the next year as a 5-year-old to be the next honest step. And so we thank you, Dr. James and Dr. Gullett, for reiterating that point and the understanding. We have put an emphasis in early learning in this district, and we're now going to ask the legislature to do the same. Hopefully they will hop on board with that recommendation. Dr. James, you had other questions.
I just wanted to, Mr. Whitehouse, props to you, no questions for you, but I've heard lots of principals speak highly about the data dashboard and all of the things they can do. So I had questions for Ms. Del Nadal and Ms. Beck, so whoever wants to first. My first question, who wants to go? It doesn't matter? Okay, Ms. Beck. Okay, so Ms. Beck, the slide where the VPK classrooms are shared, you speak to the fact that in 43 different units, we have 700 and, I'm going to find the slide, 720 students. So that's 16.7 per class on average. How many students are you putting in a VPK unit?
So that's a really great question. So those 720 students would represent our, what we're going to call VPK students that are holding a certificate of eligibility. Mm-hmm. And then we have other spaces within VPK classrooms that we designate and set aside for our inclusion students, and they are in that classroom using their individual education plan.
And they could participate in summer VPK.
So, yes, you're exactly right. So if they're not using their certificate of eligibility, 100% correct, then they can flip around in the summer prior to entering kindergarten, and then at that point, parents can utilize their certificate of eligibility. And that, quite frankly, is a lot of what we see at this point in our summer programming, is we do see those students, and it's great for them because it gives them that continual service from the school year all the way to the summer.
So we don't really have 140 seats available if we were going to 20 students per VPK class?
You are correct.
Okay, thank you for confirming that.
Yes.
If a school, so there are some schools in our communities, I'm going to give East Marion as an example. There are no preschools anywhere near East Marion Elementary School. There are none. There are no options. She would, in a perfect world, love to have another VPK unit, but also, and it's a big idea, one of those big audacious ideas, have a program similar to what we've created at Fordham where there is 3-year-olds eligible to go because there is no options. The families there have no options. So if a principal wanted to add another VPK unit, what would be the next best steps for that principal?
So that's a great question. So I think beginning that conversation with me, and then I would begin that conversation with my direct upline, which would be Ms. Talbert Irving. We again would look at the funding. So currently right now, 34% is funded through our VPK dollars. 33% is provided from the district because, again, we are serving inclusion students with an IEP, so we are getting funding for those students, and then 33% comes from federal programs. So again, as we are adding units, we want to make sure that we can sustain those units and pay for those units, but certainly we are not opposed to that. A lot of times I can think of another school in particular that certainly could, I know by the need in the community, could probably utilize the unit. However, I do know that spacing is a concern there because having been the former administrator there and then talking with the current administrator, again, it is finding that available space on the campus.
Okay. Those were my only questions for you, Ms. Beck. Thank you. 2 questions. I love that we are going to do universal screenings in 2nd grade for gifted. The screening has changed, though. Is that correct? So it used to be a screening tool that was a bit of an assessment, and now it is a teacher self-reported survey?
The universal screener is actually something that the students are doing on the computer. It's a universal screener that they complete. It's like an assessment. What we have for students that are not 2nd grade is what you're talking about, which is the GRS, which is a screening tool that the teachers fill out to say what characteristics they're observing in the students.
Understood. So that universal screener is going to be an assessment of some kind.
The 2nd grade one, yes.
Okay. Of the 181 students who passed the screener, did they all receive a full psych evaluation?
So not necessarily. They still have to do that second part, so our eligibility for them to be considered as possible gifted still includes that teacher component that they have to look at the characteristics. So eligibility for gifted as a program is 2-pronged. It's the testing that we do along with that teacher characteristic assessment that the teachers complete. So these students had a universal screener. From there, we grabbed a group of students that met the score, the cut score. From there, those students were then referred for possible gifted. Teachers completed the GRS, that was turned in, the referrals were completed, and then those that met the criteria for further testing received further testing.
So I would be interested to know, as a follow-up, of the 181 students, how many did the teachers actually refer? And then how many qualified for gifted? Because when you look at that raw data, 17% is a very inflated number when you look at globally what the gifted population is. And so if you're just looking at that number, you're thinking, wow, 17% of our 2nd graders are gifted, except then you look at our reading data and our math data, and that's not reflective.
It's several layers of filtering.
Correct. So, but that I don't think is necessarily clear if you're just following along. So I would be interested in understanding of the 181 students last year, how many of them were referred to, how many of those got the teacher referral, the first step, and then after that, and the ones who were evaluated, because that's also a heavy load for your school psychologists.
Yes.
That is incredibly significant. So if this was only 10 schools, right? 10 schools, was that what it was?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just times that by 3 because we have just about 30 elementary schools. So if we're going to have, whatever that is, 450, 500 kids referred, those teachers would then do that first step. But I mean, if they're all eligible, that's wonderful. I'm just statistically speaking, the human population does not generate that many gifted individuals. And so my concern is that we are putting an extreme load on the school psychologists who already don't have enough time to get the evaluations done. Because that's what I want to know. How many of those kids got a full evaluation last year and then qualified?
Yeah, we'll look at the data.
Because it's significant.
Shout out to our interns. So we had 3 amazing interns last year, and so that helped a little bit with that load.
Yeah.
And we always help each other out.
How many interns do you have this year?
3 again.
Okay, well, that's wonderful, because you're going to have 3 times as many kids, presumably. So that was my question for that. And then my last question, which wasn't in the PowerPoint per se, but we did talk about attendance. Can you confirm, when we're talking about absences, and I know absences has been a hot topic for this board, when we have had a CST for a student, so let's say in April of last year, we held a CST, which is an attendance meeting to discuss as a team how we can try and tackle attendance with the family. And we have that meeting. And then it's now September 7th, and the child has hit their, is it 15 days and 90 days? Okay. Is that 90 days rolling?
10 days and 90 days.
It's 10 days and 90 days.
Okay, 10 days and 90 days.
It's in sections, so not necessarily.
That's why I wanted the clarification, because it's not rolling. So there is a discrepancy within the organization, and I think we very much need to get clarification, because there are individuals who believe the 90 days is rolling, and there are individuals who believe it starts and stops with August and May. And it is incredibly imperative that we clarify this, because I believe it should be a rolling 90 days. If you miss 8 days in the second semester of last school year, and then you miss 5 days in the first 3 weeks of school, you should have hit your 10 and 90, and we should be moving, and if you've already had a CST, we should be moving you to case staffing. And so my problem here is that I'm not sure that we all, and not just us, but collectively understand if it's rolling or not rolling, and if it's not rolling, I think, I'm gonna speak for myself, but based on conversations this board has had, I wanna know how we can get it to rolling. Because getting a start over every August 10th for a family is not helping anyone.
Right.
So is it, you're saying right now it's not a rolling 90 days? Everyone gets a clean slate on August 10th. That personally, for this board member, does not work for me. I believe it should be rolling, and so whatever we need to do, if we can, I would like to know that, because.
And I do agree that there is some confusion, and that's one of our goals for this year, is not only to be more consistent with the data that we're using, but to really educate everybody on the team, including parents and staff, on what those criteria are, what those definitions are. Everyone kind of looks at truancy and chronic absenteeism, and everyone has a little bit of a different definition sometimes. We want to make sure we're focusing on that, so everybody is on the same page as we work towards our attendance campaign.
Attorney Powers, can we make it rolling, or is that something the legislator sets?
I'll need to look into it, but I don't believe that there's any problem with doing that. I mean, I don't see there being a blockade in that direction.
Okay, I know this board member would love to see a conversation in changing that to a rolling 90 versus everyone starts fresh August 10th.
And I just want to address, I'll let you know the Florida statute, because I pulled it up. It's statute number 1003.26 subsection B. So I'm trying to see if it specifies in a given school year anywhere in this, because that's the statute we're asking to be changed. So, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Gullett, as far as this attendance conversation is concerned, is there an operational expectation that we can put into place that would be appropriate to, unless there is a discrepancy with a statute, because I am 1,000% in support of making sure that we're doing all we can to foster attendance. There is so much waste that occurs when kids are missing school, and so much money that is being spent, and so much capability of the students that is being lost. And we're already, September 7th, we've been in school for quite some time, and I follow this pretty closely, and a lot of it is the frequent flyers, and they don't change. And if they had a lot of absences at the end of last school year, they're starting this school year the same way. So if there's a way operationally to make this how we approach it in Marion County Public Schools, then I would be 100% all for it, because my interpretation was that it was rolling and that it didn't make sense for it to be any other way.
And to that point too, the CST, why do I have to have a new CST every school year?
Once you hit those numbers, yeah.
I fundamentally don't agree with that. So I think we need to work through how we can address this. And if that's in a work session or something, I believe that we need to, because if I am a chronically absent child, and I'm thinking about East Marion Elementary because Ms. Dobbs and her team run amazing monthly meetings to address their attendance rate. They have 30% of their students were deemed chronically absent by the 10th day of school. By the 10th day of school. That is absolutely insane. And to think that we have to, and those are the same students, by the way, who were chronically absent last year. So why they have to start all over to get those kids to truancy court is beyond any realm of I can't even begin to understand. And those parents are not being held responsible for getting their kids to school. I feel, I can say with absolute certainty, Miss Dobbs and her team, just shy of driving their personal vehicles out to the child's house to pick them up for school, they have done everything to help these families get their kids to school. So there has to be a level of accountability for our families. I was talking to a principal, not Miss Dobbs, Miss Street at Anthony. She told me she was setting sky alerts to wake parents up, repeating sky alerts every morning to go off and the phone would ring so that the parent would wake up to bring their child to school.
Wake up rap.
And you know what? That is thinking outside the box. I love that. She said it works until they start blocking the sky alert number, but neither here nor there. My point is our principals are doing everything they can, but having us start fresh on August 10th for this particular item, I think starting fresh on August 10th works for a lot of things. I think sometimes kids do need a clean slate, but when we are talking about this, it does not work for me. It needs to be rolling, in my opinion.
Thank you, Dr. James, for bringing that up, and for Vice Chair Thrower as well. As I'm reading the statute, it says a 90 calendar day period. I think that's going to be our hindrance, because 90 calendar days from May to August.
School calendar? Or
It doesn't
yearly
say school calendar, it says calendar
I don't
day.
see that as a hindrance, because there are a lot of children who miss 10 days and have the whole summer off. Those are the kids we're talking about.
Right,
We're talking about the kids who missed 8 days in fourth quarter and then missed 2 to 3 days in the first 10 days of school. They've now hit their 10 days and 90 days, and they had the whole summer off. Let's get it cooking. We should be able to get them to K-staffing and get to truancy court by Christmas. We should not be dragging our feet on this.
And I appreciate the sentiment, absolutely. I do think it's going to take a little further legal review to see if we would be able to roll over it. Granted, if those absences are in April, that's not going to be within a 90-day period. So if it is a 90 calendar day, again, when does that calendar begin? It doesn't say school calendar, and nowhere in the statute does it mention within the school year or any, it doesn't say that. It says 90 calendar day period. So it's pretty gray, talking about within a calendar month, 10 unexcused absences within a 90 calendar day period, which is the statute that we have addressed that we're wanting to have altered and changed, because we don't want it to just be 10, even if you have 10 unexcused absences and 8 of them are in first quarter and the next 3 or 4 are in the second quarter, that needs to count, and we don't need to have an immediate changeover after 90 days. And I do believe that there are some schools, families, principals, et cetera, that are considering each quarter you get another 10 days. And so we don't need to have students that are absent 38 days out of the school year thinking that that's okay and not hitting truancy court. And right now, I believe that's the way the statute kind of gives them that flexibility in our interpretation, which is what we're asking for.
Yes.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. And in the meantime, operationally, whatever we can do to convey out to the parents that, and as a community, prioritizing school is the foundationally best way to increase our academic performance. And our community is a big part of that. It's a critical part of that. And one thing we did learn from the whole COVID thing was we learned about flexibility. And that, again, is part of the ongoing community conversation, that if the community really supports high academic performance in our schools, then how can parents be supported that both work full-time, that have several kids, that don't really have a lot of a safety net, that don't really have a plan B, that need flexibility if they need to come and pick up their child, if they need to come for a child study team meeting so it can be face-to-face, or if they can at least be granted a space at work to have a Zoom face-to-face. It's all of those millions of little details. And also the ones that we know were struggling at the end of last year, attendance-wise, at the beginning of this year, looking forward to having a much better year attendance-wise, whatever the outreach says, that also acknowledges that there's an expectation. New year, new you, but if not, we've got eyes and this is a partnership. So I couldn't be more supportive of this conversation. Those of you that know me already knew that. And this is the beauty of the conversations that we're able to have now that we're past. I'm proud of the fact that we never closed one school, but the exclusions, the quarantines, the family disruptions, not only were they tragic, but they also sadly seem to have created a lot of bad habits across the country. We're not the only ones dealing with this, but with the fantastic support we're getting from our legislature, we're breaking ground on a new MTC building, this week, tomorrow. And that's how people lose jobs, because they don't show up. So it does start. It starts at those very young ages. And, I do wonder, in the old days, you had something called nursery school, and the churches were a big part of that. And I don't know if any of that's even ever happening now. A lot seems to fall on the schools, because we are being held so accountable, which is a great thing, because we want people to be successful. But with all that accountability comes a great deal of responsibility and a great deal of cost. So if we're going to bear that burden, then there needs to be a match, in my opinion, of the expectations and the follow-through on those, because we're churning through employees way too fast. And I think that this is foundationally a reason for that. You're putting your best foot forward. You have a great dashboard with lesson plans. I'm expanding now into the whole presentation. We're doing our best to support teachers that maybe have never set foot in a classroom. They're not coming with that foundational knowledge, providing so much support. But then kids aren't showing up regularly. And how disruptive is that to everything and everybody? And that ripples across the whole community. So this couldn't be more important to define and know what where we can work within the law until the law changes, or until we help make it change or advocate for it, whatever it takes. But in the meantime, very clearly defining operationally with the board. Lori Conrad's not here, but in her words of the past, she's been very supportive of this, with complete and full board support and sense of urgency. It's foundational. That's what I have. And you guys are amazing, I see systems in place now. I see execution. I see follow-through. I see passion. I see commitment. I see partnering. I see that momentum. That's why we're all so excited. This is what we've been working for. The donkey is coming out of the ditch. But we need that final big push. And then we'll have it, because then what community doesn't want to be part of something really great in our schools? Nobody. So we'll be good.
We accept the challenge and look forward to more conversations.
Absolutely. In meetings.
Dr. James, did that conclude yours? And does that conclude yours?
Probably not, but yes, for now.
Okay. Reverend Cummings, did you have anything specific before I go to mine?
I did. Very, very good presentation, excellent presentation. It shows us where we are and where we're going, where we're trying to get to, and where we've been also. My question, I guess, is for Mr. Whitehouse, and it's a simple question. The data dashboard that you spoke of, and you said it's averaging about 6,500 views per month. I think I heard it, but I'm not sure if I heard all of it. Who actually has access to this data dashboard?
Yeah, great question. So it's all district-based administrators, all school-based administrators, and all teachers. And so we completed our teacher level training. So anybody who's instructional staff or above would have access to the dashboard. Teachers can see their individual classrooms. So obviously they wouldn't have access to the school-wide data, but anybody at the school-wide administrator or instructional coach level would be able to see school-wide data and then district access for district staff.
What about those like social workers, assistants?
Yes, they all have access.
Liaisons and all those people.
All of those, most of them are tied to specific schools that they support, but some would have global access as well if they work with a lot of schools.
And it goes in line what this conversation we're talking about with this absenteeism. I agree with the rest of the board that I think once we can get this absenteeism, that will be a huge push and push us in the right direction. So I just want to make sure that the people that need to see it can see it and are utilizing it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitehouse. My question's right there too, so you might want to just stay put. So back on slide 7, just for those paying attention and watching, the center graph there, the bar graph that you have, shows 18% chronic absenteeism. Is that a current district number?
That is the number from whenever I took that screenshot a few days ago. So that changes, and keep in mind
Sure.
the way the dashboard tracks chronic absenteeism is 10% within the current school year. And so again, if we're talking only 10 days of school, if you missed one day, you've missed 10% of those days. So you are now by definition chronically absent.
Sure.
And so that number will fluctuate throughout the year. To me, what I think the bigger piece from this is being able to identify early those students that are trending chronic. So the ones that are just starting to get on that radar, how do we find those students, identify them, and start intervening with those students early? Because you can actually track on the dashboard within an individual student profile how their attendance has changed. And you can see very quickly students within the last 10 days. So if we've done a CST meeting, we've intervened with a student who's chronically absent, I can now see their attendance record if it's improving over the last few days. So it'll track that trend line of attendance for those students. And we can say, yes, this intervention is working. We've seen growth, or no, it has not. We haven't seen an improvement.
So also there, in that 18%, let's say that's just a snapshot of where we are in the first 4 weeks of school. It may not be there, I understand that's fluctuating. But from a trend standpoint, are we seeing our chronic absenteeism currently, 2023, 2024, occurring in elementary, middle, or high school, or it's just across the board?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from my last recollection of looking at the dashboard, we can actually track chronic absenteeism by grade level and by school, and by grade level within a school. So typically we see the most in kindergarten, not surprisingly, especially at the beginning of the year. I've been in some elementary classrooms lately and they're all sniffling and sneezing and coughing. So that tends to be where we see the bigger gaps is early grades. And then of course, when we get into our high school, our seniors that start getting senioritis tend to miss a lot at the beginning too.
Right. Okay. Also noting here I'm not going to call that a graph, to the right, to your image here to the right, that's like a plot kind of. Heat map, thank you.
I was going to comment on that, actually. I'm going to incorporate that into my future courtroom appearances, because any day you get to provide someone with a geospatial heat map and use that in what you're saying, you're winning right there. So that's good.
We like big technical terms.
Yes, no, thank you for the geospatial view of where our students are. I think that also could potentially assist us in some of our conversations about impact fees currently that we're having and the growth that we're experiencing in certain parts of our county and not in other parts of our county. So that was my comment there. I also wanted to touch on, I believe I heard you say, we also have a post-graduation dashboard.
Yes, we're working towards that one. So we've just signed an agreement with the National Student Clearinghouse, which allows them to track our graduates' data post-graduation. So they already have a warehouse of data from all colleges and universities, post-secondary institutions, technical colleges across the country that participate. So once we provide them with a list of names, they then will provide us regular reports on how our students are performing post-graduation by cohort. So we'll see it as a district, and each high school principal will be able to see it just for the students that have graduated their high school over the years. They'll be able to see each cohort and even be able to identify student success.
Yes, please, and thank you. Something that this district has not done a great job of, but grateful we're moving forward in, is any kind of alumni database, any kind of tracking of any of our students post-graduation. So I'm grateful that we are moving forward with trying to at least head that off. So thank you so much.
Madam Chair, before you go.
Yes.
Before you leave that slide, I do have another question. We said that they don't do the referral until 10 days, correct? I think that's what I heard, 10 days. So why are we waiting till 10 days before we do anything? I think we should start moving at 3 days or something.
They do get an attendance letter at 5 days, I think. At 5 days, they get an attendance letter. So the attendance letter goes home that says you're on watch, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and then when they hit the 10 days, that triggers the letter to go home for scheduling the CST.
So we wait until I think we should be at 3 days. We start.
Well, some schools do it more aggressively than others, and I think that speaks to Dr. Gullett and a procedure, as Nancy, as Vice Chair Thrower was speaking about, is there's different schools tackle it differently. I know because I've been very involved with East Marion, and they're a tackle on attendance, like their, I'm going to say homeschool liaison, which is not the name anymore, but I mean, she is on it. You don't miss a day of school out there without getting a phone call from her.
Right.
So I think different, but to the same note, which is what we talked about the staffing plans, she's at a school with, 400 or 500 kids, and there's one of those at Westport.
Right.
So it's a little harder to stay on top of that.
Thank you.
And certainly I can, at some point in the future, give you a deep dive in this dashboard, because there's a lot of features in here that I think are going to help our school teams be successful. One of the things we can do with absentee tracking is I can take that chart, I can click on that group of students in the yellow bar that are trending chronic, and I can get a list of names, add that list of names to a student monitoring group, which then would allow me to monitor just those students with my dashboard in any element. So I can see their attendance, their academics, their behaviors. I can then take that as administrator and push that monitoring group out to all my teachers, and they would see only their students that fall in that monitoring group and be able to track those students individually within their classrooms. So we'd have all eyes on campus watching those groups of students and providing support for them.
It sounds like it's a tool that we haven't even tapped all of the things that it can do that will be helpful for student success. So.
Thank you. And Dr. Gullett, personally, I would love to have a future work session just on the dashboard, just learning. And I don't know how this dashboard ties into the athletic dashboard, because I know that's something separate that we have tracking right now, where any student who has aspirations to play at future collegiate levels, what they need to be tracking to do for Division I, Division II, NAIA, et cetera. So would love to have a deep dive on this. I think the community needs to know what we're tracking. Dr. Gullett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I didn't want to interrupt. So absolutely, I think that's a great idea, and I think it's important for the board and the public to see, because I know how excited the schools are as they started to.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I welcome that.
I'll just note that we need to be concerned as we're doing this, that the access of who can view this data, because when you get into a certain level of granularity, as I'm pretty sure Mr. Whitehouse will back me up on that, you've got data that needs to be de-identified before it's released.
Yes.
Right.
So that's something that I know they take great detail and caution to do, and in order to maintain compliance with FERPA, we have to be, cautious about how we grant access and to whom.
Understood. Thank you.
In the work session, we wouldn't share names. We were sharing, as you see today, what we're doing and all the different components of how we access that.
Right.
Never shared a student
The
information.
identified data cures that, so.
Thank you. I have 3 different slides I'll have questions about. Slide 8 I will go to next. I know Dr. James asked some questions on this, and it would have probably been helpful if my questions had followed hers, but so understanding that the 17.25% were recommended for further evaluation, that further evaluation became a teacher assessment. I understand Dr. James' concern, at least based on what I understood her to say, that was the concern of potentially the volume going to the folks who do that screening. My question, I guess, and/or concern is that the next level of assessment is only a teacher assessment. We don't have the parental assessment, also a part of that second level. And that's my concern as a parent who's done these before. I personally, this is not my own child, but I personally know of a child who was in our district who would have been screened very highly and gifted at a much earlier than second grade level, but was completely nonverbal in school. Completely refused to speak in school, and the teacher probably would have, if only the assessment was the teacher's, would have said that child did not qualify for gifted, yet the student at home was doing something vastly different, including taking clocks apart and putting them together as a 6-year-old. So that is my concern, and I understand it may actually heighten the number that we would have, but if we're only using a teacher assessment, then we actually may still be missing the mark.
Thank you. And so I would say, yes, we use that GRS, which is that rating scale. Part of, and I'm going to step back a couple years and go historical, part of us making that change to do that was an OCR complaint that we received that we did not cast a wide enough net, and we were missing some of those students. So that was actually devised in order to catch more of those students. It's not just the teacher. We're very flexible with that. We've had sometimes our art and music teacher. We also have them complete those because they'll see different characteristics in those classes that we might not see in the actual classroom, right? Parents are also available to provide input. So it's not just, it's make it or break it with that one teacher that fills out that GRS. There's lots of other ways for us to get to the point where we have a good referral. But what we want to do is not have lots and lots of referrals that are coming in. The testing happens, and then the testing is saying you were expecting something to happen and the testing didn't quite align with that. So it's just another prong to, these are other characteristics we're also looking for, not just that IQ testing, if that makes sense.
It does. I just, when we had the explanation previously, it was, yes, this is an assessment that the student takes, then the next step is the teacher gives you an evaluation. And if we're stopping at teacher, then to take that to the next step, that's a concern for me, that I think if we were able to do teacher and parent, I mean, I've seen the parent side, I've seen the teacher side, and they basically look almost the same.
Yeah.
But if there was a way to combine that, then that may change the numbers. One way or the other, I don't know.
And that teacher assessment is that checklist of characteristics,
right,
which we also have one for the parents, so you're correct.
And we are implementing having those simultaneously, be as phase 2 of the further evaluation.
Not for every case. It's not something that's done for every single one of those referrals, but as needed.
Okay. I think, I don't want to belabor the point. Hopefully you understand what my thought and concern is there, that I just don't want us to be missing anybody just because of a teacher evaluation. Again, this is a really high number, and Dr. James made this is a really high number for students that potentially do need further evaluation, but I also think that it also speaks to the fact that we have been missing them. And so I want to ensure that we are reaching every student that does need exceptional student gifted services is going to receive them, and having a universal screener is something I'm grateful Dr. Gullett has brought to this district, because it wasn't something we did before, and that we'll have it in all schools. It will become a heavy load if in fact we do have that many students that qualify, but that's also a good thing, because we want to ensure that we're meeting every student and helping every student succeed, regardless of what their exceptionalities in either spectrum would be.
Then I can ask for more school psychologists.
Dr. Gullett.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I think it's a critical point, well taken. And I think there's a vast difference between understanding and recognizing giftedness and high achievement. And giftedness often looks very different from child to child and is often missed, which is why, I was passionate about putting this in the plan. And so I think looking at parent input, all different sources, because typically you'll see about a quarter of that first step and then a quarter of the second step, rough numbers, don't quote me, historically move forward through that process. But it does, and one of the things that we did talk about as a team when we put this plan in place was the need for training for identification of bright learners, high achievers, and giftedness, because they are distinctly different. Sometimes the same, but often very different and unique characteristics of gifted students. So, point well taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that was that. Slide 11, maybe both of you still there. Let me see. This is on ELL. So my question on this one, so let's see, I had two different questions I wrote down here. So with these students, so we still have 63% of these students, even on Progress Monitoring 3, still scoring at a level 1. And I don't know that we're doing, oh, sorry. Hi, Miss Hughes. I'm like, I didn't remember who spoke about this one. My question is language their only barrier? So we probably aren't doing this, or we don't have the capability of doing this, but let's just say Progress Monitoring 3, we were able to offer in Creole, just hypothetically. And the students that are the ELL Creole-speaking students at home would take that in that language and pass with flying colors, but then if they take it in English, it's a level 1. That's my question. Is language the only barrier for the predominant percentage of these students, or are there other barriers that are impacting their educational learning?
So what we do consistently at schools, according to our guidelines for ESOL, is that we must conduct meetings, our English Language Learner Committee meetings. And in our committee meetings, that's when we take the opportunity to look at student data and have those conversations just like you're talking about. Is this a language barrier, or is it something else where we need to start an MTSS process? So we have done a really great job in last year in being able to wing through those type of questions and conversations, because we don't want to just continue students in the program when it's not a language problem. So we are consistently cleaning it up. So these numbers are based on last year, but like I shared a little bit earlier, that is very fluid as far as the population. Just looking at them from Progress Monitoring 1 to 3, Progress Monitoring 1, it captured 2,039 Ls, whereas when we look at Progress Monitoring 3, that's 2,343 Ls that they're actually looking at. So it's very fluid, but majority of these students, it is a language issue, if you will, or barrier. We do have accommodations that are extended to our ESOL students that are in the program, and so they do get those accommodations, which are, of course, our flexible setting, and then flexible scheduling and getting those breaks in smaller group, and then assistance in the heritage language for some of our assessments.
Okay, thank you for that. And you gave us some numbers there. Do we have any rough numbers for our school year so far, starting out? I mean, are we starting in the 2,300 some odd range of students that are in our, and I'm using ELL, English Language Learners. I don't like it when we use acronyms, and I just use one myself with people listening might not know what that is. But English Language Learners, are we still in that 2,000 range of students, or are we thinking it's more than that this year?
We are currently sitting at our LYs as of yesterday, and our LYs are our students that are in our program. 2,280 students are currently sitting in our program. However, this is a very busy time of the year with a lot of new registrations and families filling out our home language surveys, indicating that there's another language that has been spoken in the home. So right now we have pending cases of 930 as of yesterday.
That's a big number.
It is.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. That concludes my questions for you. My last questions are on slide 18. If the board doesn't have any questions on what I've gone over so far, this is the last slide in the presentation. Zello. I'm so excited. Dr. Livengood and Dr. Hembrook. This is now taking the place of what we used to know as My Career Shines. My first question on Zello, at what ages and what grade levels are students going to start interacting with Zello, and like when is that rollout occurring?
So the platform is available now on the student's desktop, but it's available for K-12. So guidance counselors, as Dr. Livengood mentioned, are getting trained. And then once they're fully trained, then we'll begin the rollout of specific activities that could occur for each of the grade levels K-12.
Okay, good. So K-12, that's wonderful, because I think last time the Career Shine started in 4th grade, perhaps, I think. Ish, maybe 6th grade.
6th grade.
6th grade, sorry, 6th grade, thank you. So starting in kindergarten, that's even an even better time for that. But will this be incorporated into something throughout a student's either day, week, month, school year? Will and how, not just a meeting with a guidance counselor, but actually incorporated into school days? How will students have the opportunity to know what to do, how to do it? Will there be lesson plans associated with it? I mean, I'm not saying they need to take 6 weeks to do it. I'm just saying the only way this will be an effective tool for all students with all access and their families, potentially, because My Career Shines had a family component. The parents could look at that stuff too. I'm hoping this does, I think it does. But what opportunities are there available for students to interact with this through a given school year?
So that's going to be part of that framework and rollout. And so it'll be more based on grade level. So for example, in 1st grade, here are some of the different activities that a school can incorporate into either it's day or whether it's a week, opportunities for students to participate that. Once you get up into the upper grade levels in secondary education, we will be tying that into some of the Canvas courses and activities for them as well. So it would look specific, but once I can gather that for you and send that to you if you'd like.
Sure, I'm very interested in this. I mean, this was something I was passionate about whenever I had the opportunity to hopefully had my own children in programs and so forth, and that kind of just went away. The other platform kind of went away. So I'm looking forward to this platform now that I have high schoolers that really need to be focused on what the career options are, but also considering how that plays into the CTE courses that students are choosing and whether they might need to be dual enrolled at MTC or CF or I think I'm excited to see where it goes, and as we have a more extensive rollout, I just welcome the further conversation.
No problem.
Thank you. Board, are there any other questions on this presentation? All right, is there any public comment on strategic plan update goal 1?
We had Mr. Prohaska, but I think he left.
Mr. Prohaska has left, yes. That did go probably a little longer than our folks were expecting, so thank you. I'm sure we will hear from him later, and he's also a member of our Leadership MCPS class this year. Okay, terrific. Moving on, we will go to the next item. Dr. Gullett.
Thank you. So moving on for all of the support structures and having facilities conducive for positive student learning, I'm going to present to you Ms. Dobbins, who's going to talk about our 5-year facilities work program. Thank you.
Can we take a recess?
We can, but we are breaking at 12, so we.
I mean, like a 5-minute.
Okay, we have a request for a 5-minute recess. It's 11:05. We'll recess for 5 minutes.
I don't want to miss any of this, but
Thank you.
Sometimes you just have to take
coming back in from recess at 11:09 a.m. Welcome back to the podium, Ms. Dobbins.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Chair Dr. Campbell, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Gullett. Today we will be presenting our recommendations for the 5-year facility work program. And before I get started, I do want to thank our Supervisor of Facilities, Robert Knight, and our Supervisor of Tech Services, Sean Duncan, and the principals, because this is really a team effort to put this plan together. We went through 22 drafts of this plan. This plan started back in the spring, and what we do is we pull the data on our systems, on our work orders. We take the previous plan, roll forward projects that are still going on, and remove projects that are completed. We also, in the spring, send out a survey to principals where they take the time to list their priorities of their facility needs when it comes to new construction and maintenance and renovations. We then take that plan, and to me, the critical piece to this is we take everything that the principals give us, we take all of the things that we already know in existence, and we separate them out by systems. So we take all of our HVAC projects, all of our plumbing, electrical, and so forth projects, and we list them all in one shot. And then we meet with the foremans of those departments, and they go back to the crews that are actually doing the work on those systems. And those crews have the opportunity to say, hey, this is our highest priority. I'm out there all the time at that school. That air conditioning, that HVAC system is shot, and we need to move this up in the priority list. So it really gets it down to the weeds of what our needs are to develop the priority by our systems. We bring that back together, put it together in this plan, take it to executive cabinet for review, and here we are today for the school board review. Once we review and move this on to a board action, after the board approves it, we then have to submit it to DOE. So that's the steps we take in developing this. I'll break this presentation down into revenue that we receive that develops what we have to budget for projects. Then we'll look at expenditures and then do what we've approved for this year and moving into what that compares to what's funded and unfunded. So as we look at this slide, you'll see some red numbers at the top. So these are dollars that we currently have that are rollover funds that are restricted from previous sales tax that was collected in 04 and 09, and also impact fees from 07 to 12. We will be looking to utilize these funds on the sales tax. We can utilize them at 4 schools. Those 4 schools are Liberty Middle, Horizon Academy, Legacy Elementary, and Marion Oaks. And as you know, we will be building some wings in 3 of those 4 schools, and that money would be leveraged in some of those fundings. Moving on down the line, you'll see that we have state and other revenue sources. We still continue to receive $0 for PICO, for new construction and maintenance. We also continue to receive $0 for impact fees and $0 in sales tax, all revenue sources that are available to us. We do receive some funding from the state in the capital outlay and debt service cash flow. That is at $1.5 million. We also receive some funding from the state on the interest of those debt service at $25,000. And we still receive some funds, although drastically reduced over the last several years, in the Educational Security Grant of $290,827. I do want to point out that the security grant is for fencing, and so it is a restricted item as well. So that leaves us with our biggest revenue source of being our 1.5 millage. We estimate the millage to come in around $50 million, $50.2 million. And as you project out over the years, you'll see that it increases by 2% over the years. But our presentation today is really about focusing on the current year, because although we prioritized years 2 through 5, we know that they constantly change based on needs and so forth of our facilities. So we then turn the page and we have our capital outlay revenue in a pie chart, just to give you where are our biggest revenue sources. And as you can see, our largest revenue source, or our main funding source, is that 1.5 millage. What's added that's not on the previous chart is what's on the pie chart in red, and that's our rollover fund balance. And our rollover fund balance consists of those projects that have been approved and are in the process of being completed from previous plans. So that takes us sometimes 2 to 3 years to complete construction or install an HVAC system school-wide. So those are rollover dollars that are restricted. As you look to the right, you'll see that you also have the security grant listed as restricted, impact fees restricted, sales tax, and those are former impact fees and sales tax that are restricted as well. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what our expenses are right off the top before we can even finalize what money we have available to begin new projects. So on this slide, you'll see that buses, so when we purchase buses, it comes out of our capital outlay plan. We have increased our routes by 13 routes this year, and as we plan to add new schools, that's going to also increase routes. Also, we have an aging bus fleet, so we expect to spend about $1.2 million on new bus purchases. You'll see those coming to board action very quickly because we have been alerted that they will increase the cost of buses after December. So we want to make sure that we push that purchase through before December. Line 2, you'll see that we have buses rolling over from a previous loan that we took. We purchased over 100 buses back in 2019 and 20, and we still owe on that loan at just over $500,000. We have in here new vehicles for the white fleet at just over $500,000 as well. Last year, we only requested $61,000 in this item, so it has significantly increased, but we have some aging vehicles that we have to replace. You'll also see from the 2021 vehicle purchase a rollover of $242,000. And this year, for the first time, you'll see the new statute impact of charter schools receiving part of our millage. This year, that we estimate that to be at $61,000, but as you know, that statute increases it every year, and we're going to continue to have to provide more capital outlay to charter schools as the years come through. We also, in order to fund our maintenance department, remove $4.5 million out of the capital outlay. We transfer that over to the general fund, and that's where our technical services uses those funds for maintenance projects. Property insurance is at 2.3. This also comes out of capital outlay, and this is a $700,000 increase from last year. We continue to have a debt service of almost $10 million. These are for a loan that we took back that included schools such as the renovations to Vanguard and Lake Ware High School, and also building Hammett Bowen and also some various wings. Also in the plan, first time, you'll see the leased portable classrooms impacting us at $1.7 million. You'll see that in the first year that's going to have the highest impact, because not only do we have to pay for them to be installed upfront, we also have to pay upfront in the first year the removal when we decide to return those back to the leasing company. And then, of course, you have the monthly rent of those portables. Equipment is down. It was $172,000 last year. The request this year is $51,000. This is equipment that we use for our maintenance and technical services. So in total, our expenses that come out of the capital outlay plan comes to $21.2 million, and we represent that in the next slide as a graph, just to highlight that our debt service is almost 50% of our expenses. When we draw the loan for our construction, our debt service is going to go up significantly. So We've all had those conversations about the critical need for impact fees to offset that cost and to reimburse that loan. If that doesn't happen, then you're going to see that our debt service is going to eat out pretty much our entire capital outlay plan. So to summarize, the revenue difference is we have a total work program of $57.3 million. However, keeping in mind that we have $26 million in rollover funds, what that essentially means is that we only have $30.8 million to plan for new projects for this school year. So how do we fund those? In the next several slides, and of course I'm not going to go through these line item by line item, but what I want to point out is if the dollar figure is in red, it is a rollover project. We cannot stop that project. It's already in process, and it's money that's allocated from the previous year or two work program. But as you look through the ones that are in blue, that are new projects that total $30 million, you'll see that our priorities are going to be those HVAC projects, the roofs, the electrical systems, the ADA compliance things that we have to do. Also, we've talked about in the past the stadium lighting upgrades to all of our stadiums at our high schools. So those bulbs that are currently in those stadium lights are obsolete. We no longer can get them, so they are having to be replaced with LED for the safety of our athletes on those fields. Ultimately, in the long run, it will save us significantly on that electrical bill for burning those lights in the stadiums. Slide 7, 8, and 9 continue on for all the projects that we are building. I do want to point out we did have some concerns with the North Marion Middle School roof leaks over the hurricane that is funded in this plan, and we'll begin working on that project as well. So the total amount of funds for this year will be $57.3 million, but I do just want to highlight, again, $30 million of that 57.3 is new money, leaving us with $26 million worth of rollover that's not considered new money. And then wrapping the whole work program up, the funded capacity, which is the top line, we have no dollars earmarked for projects that impact classrooms, meaning capacity of classrooms. We're not building new classrooms using capital outlay funds. So when we talk about our 5-year plan of building the elementary schools and the wings and so forth, that those are not dollars coming out of the capital outlay. Again, recall we're taking the loan for the certificate of participation to build those items, so they're still listed as unfunded in this plan until they're completed. So for year 23-24, we still have a 92.2 unfunded for new classroom construction. The next two lines refer to maintenance, repairs, and renovation. So we are funding 57.3 capital outlay dollars to maintenance, and we still have a remaining in this school year of $104 million worth of need. So the bottom line, when you break it down to its parts, we have a total work program for, and I'm going to do the whole 5 years, so it's going to be that bottom right figure. Over the next 5 years, we expect to generate through our revenue $213 million that we can use for maintenance. $213 million, I'm sorry. However, we still have $838 million worth of needs that still go unmet in the next 5 years. That comes out to a funding source of only being able to fund 20% of this entire plan. In the attachments, you have the entire plan in PDF form that was attached to this agenda items. It will spell out what we do predict to do in years 2, 3, 4, and 5. It also lists all of those unfunded projects. But again, just focusing on what we plan to do in this current year and what our needs still remain at 80% of an unfunded maintenance plan and new construction plan. So with that, I'll hand it back to Dr. Gullett.
Thank you, Ms. Dobbins, and thank you, team, for all the hard work. Board, we're available to answer questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett, and thank you, Ms. Dobbins. Who wants to start?
I just have a brief remark.
Sure, Dr. James.
I just thank you for your work in putting this together. I think it's important to note that, I don't have the specific number up, but even with the $300 million loan, we're still short $500 million in the next 5 years. Rough numbers, right? And so it speaks to the continued conversation we're having regarding impact fees and a further conversation at some point that this board will have regarding sales tax. We have to continue to talk about our funding sources and what that's going to look like, because even with $300 million, roughly, loan that we're taking, we're still short $500 million. And that is only addressing really the bare minimum of the growth pains that we're experiencing and the bare minimum for maintenance. We could really glorify that list, but 22 edits later, you guys have really dialed it down to just address the absolute necessities. So it's just important for our community and the transparency you're providing here for people to understand we are doing some of this on our own, and we've been advised $300 million is about the number where we can conservatively take the risk for the loan, but we still need another $500 million to close the gap. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Dr. James. Additional comments?
I do got a question, and it may be unrelated, but it was just something that I meant to ask you the other day. On slide 10, it says about generator maintenance, district-wide. Do we get any funding from any other county agencies or entities for generator maintenance, considering that our shelters and all that stuff?
We do not.
So we bear that whole burden.
We do, and we're required to load test those generators annually.
That's interesting. Thank you. And you know why I'm asking that question?
I do.
Okay.
I do, sir.
Thank you, Reverend Cummings. I think that we have potentially slated an agenda item for future work session to have a greater conversation about what sheltering looks like in this county and what our role is in that in comparison to other counties around the state. So I think that conversation will potentially occur at greater length in the future. My question of you, Ms. Dobbins, is going to be an interesting one because I appreciate all of this, and I certainly appreciate the understanding that we are $500 million short over the next 5 years at least. We know that for sure. What tough conversations does this board need to have about some of these particular facilities? And you don't have to call one out, any facility, but what kind of tough conversations does this board need to have to help us get where we really, because these numbers, we know it's $500 million right now, but some of this is just putting Band-Aids on the facility we're sitting in right now, or Band-Aids on other facilities we have students actually in. One of these is to do a replacement of our Lake Weir Middle School campus, and we know that has been a continuing conversation since the sales tax, because that Lake Weir Middle School replacement was a part of that sales tax referendum back in the number, whatever the number was, 2004 through 2009, I think. Yes. So that potentially, even if we needed it, that $4.6 million that's still remaining out there could also be used for middle school DD, which is the Lake Weir Middle School replacement, in addition to Liberty and Horizon. If we didn't have to use it for Liberty and Horizon at Marion Oaks, whatever, we could use it for at least a jump start there. But I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I understand that there are additional conversations that this board needs to have, and maybe that's just a whole separate work session in and of itself. But that's my question.
Happy to answer, and I think this board knows that I will always give an answer based on my professional belief of what's best for kids. That's what we're here to do. Before I truly answer that, I need to tie in some things that Dr. James has said and what you have shared as well. I want to highlight that, understanding the conversations that are happening outside of board meetings and so forth that we have to have with community and other stakeholders. So for public purposes, if I'm going to give a scenario, if we take the loan, which we have to do in order to build those schools, such as the 2 elementary, the wings, the middle school, the gym, and so forth, if we do not get impact fees, then the debt service to that loan is going to then be greater than the ability to maintain our schools. And I want to be very, very clear about that. When you increase the debt service, so when we go back to this slide here, you'll see the debt service is already at 10 million, and it's still 10 million next year. So we're going to be adding millions of dollars of debt service by drawing the loan. If that number goes up and we have no other revenue source, then we're not going to have then money to do anything in year 2, 3, 4, and 5 maintenance-wise. And that is a huge safety concern in my professional opinion. When we barely can Band-Aid things now, how are we going to maintain when we have no money if we don't start collecting that impact fee? On top of that, talking about the sales tax, if we're going to continue to address the growth, which we've all recall the presentation of adding schools later down the line and monitoring that growth and so forth, none of that will be able to happen without a sales tax. So that means that we're going to go do our 5-year plan and everything stops. And if we don't have impact fees, then maintenance stops on existing buildings. And that's a great concern I have. So to answer your question, some of those things we continue to have to think of outside the box. As you know, we did some rezoning last year to help offset some of the overcrowding in the southwest area. We're going to have to expand upon that. And I know Dr. Gullett, and I don't want to speak for Dr. Gullett at all, but she knows, and she's put in place conversations, strategic conversations. And if Dr. Gullett, if you'd like to talk about those instead of me talking about those, you can do that, or I'll continue on with thoughts. So those conversations that Dr. Gullett has had and continue to have and start developing the plans are going to have to address the north side of our district, meaning we have an Anthony Elementary School that has a very low population, a very high maintenance need, and cost us more to operate than a return on investment generates. So then you have to start looking at how we leverage Spar Elementary School, which is also an aging facility that we need to start replacing like we did South Ocala Elementary School. So we have to start having those conversations about what we do in that area, at the same time what we do with Fessenden Elementary School and Reddick Elementary School. So those are starting points to maximize our capacity of student seats and get them filled and shut down, or repurpose is a better word, repurpose schools that no longer have a return on investment due to the high cost of maintenance needs of those facilities. We also have to then turn and look at the Bellevue side of our district. Looking at the Bellevue Elementary and the Bellevue Santos, those schools need to be replaced, not renovated. Those are just pockets. North Marion High School has to be replaced. That high school was built on a shoestring budget of just over $5 million because it was supposed to be temporary, and here we sit how many years later? And so we have huge needs that we're going to have to start addressing. When you talk about the high school in Denellen, you better also talk about the middle school and that aging facility, and just the lack of ability to really have a flow in that campus that allows for really the continuity of the functioning of the campus. So I could go on forever about the needs, but we do have to start having, I would say, starting with the Anthony and the Spar, the Reddick, and the Fessenden, and then also looking at rebuilding new schools in the Bellevue area and Denellen area.
Thank you, Ms. Dobbins, for transparently answering the very difficult question that I asked, and I knew that you would do so, so that's part of the reason that I asked it. But while we are having to have so many community conversations about the vast needs of Marion County Public Schools facilities, I want to say a couple of things. First thing is, if COVID taught us anything, it's that students, on the vast majority of students, need face-to-face instruction. And all of the data that's coming out of colleges right now, all of the data that showing that freshmen are not prepared for college. And I'm not saying every student is going to go to college. I'm just using recent scientific data that's coming out of colleges that freshmen are not prepared. Why? Because a lot of them were homeschooled, or a lot of them were virtual schooled, or COVID is going to teach us that face-to-face instruction is vital. Where does face-to-face instruction occur? In brick and mortar buildings. And for too long, this district has been putting Band-Aids on because we haven't had funding sources, and I understand that. But additionally, I'm grateful that you, again, transparently shared that the northern part of our county has a lot of seats in it and or aging buildings. Both are happening in the northern part of our county. But growth is also not occurring there. And it is not solely because people aren't moving there. Part of it is because the county has actually restricted growth in the northern part of the farmland preservation area that has been set apart by Marion County government would have potentially put growth in a significant part of the northern part of this county. That will not occur because of what the county has set aside with the farmland preservation area. We also have the Ocala National Forest that is what it is and will always be. So we know growth cannot occur in protected areas. And good, bad, or indifferent, those are in the northern part of our county where we do have seats available and aging buildings. So thank you for bringing that up. I know it's not necessarily a comfortable conversation, and you just mentioning it today is the spark. We haven't actually got a real flame yet, but that's the spark that's potentially going to touch the first piece of kindling that gets this conversation started, that this board needs to be able to weigh in on decisions that previous boards have had 10, 15 years ago. And where we land is to be determined. But I believe, individual board member Allison Campbell believes, that this board and this superintendent at least need to have the opportunity to have these conversations. And so while we're addressing the 5-year work plan and what this looks like, and we know where the growth is, and we have a heat map and all the things now that show where our students are and where our students are coming, and again, face-to-face instruction is vital. I want everyone in the community to understand that. We are going to continue to have data come out, specifically in the state of Florida, that we were grateful that we had as much face-to-face instruction as we've had, but other states are going to validate why, especially in those early years, it's just not a good idea for a lot of learners to have virtual instruction or something that looks different than face-to-face brick and mortar instruction. We're going to have it. It's going to come over the next 5. We're all going to see it. So acknowledging it and addressing it now, that's what we're doing, and starting to have those hard conversations is something I, as an individual board member, welcome, at least the opportunity to weigh in. So thank you, Ms. Dobbins, for saying that. Board, Reverend Cummings.
No, go ahead, Dr. James, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to mention, I appreciate that this is Ms. Dobbins' first time sharing that about District 5 to the board, but I would say that it's not just a spark. It may seem like a spark, seeing as this is the first time it's being talked about in a pretty long time publicly, but Dr. Gullett, myself, and Ms. Dobbins, as well as other individuals in the cabinet, have been having conversations about District 5 specifically for the better part of 6 months. So we've talked to the principals. Dr. Gullett has a team of individuals coming together to come up with some strategies. So it's been something that's been happening for a while.
Thank you, Dr. James. My point of mentioning the spark is I think this is the first public conversation that has been had at all. So I'm grateful that the groundwork is occurring, and that's the foresight and the expertise and understanding that Dr. Gullett brings to the table and that you as the representative for District 5. But to my knowledge, this is the first public conversation where we are at least addressing and acknowledging publicly that the other 4 board members will be weighing in this conversation in the near future. Thank you. Reverend Cummings.
Thank you. Ms. Dobbins, I'm just kind of sitting up here writing some figures out. So the total work programs that's not funded is $800 million plus dollars. And then yeah, that's the one I'm looking at. And then the loan is about $300 million.
Yes.
So we're about 600 million short. When we look at that, are we taking into consideration that unfunded amount is probably going to change because of rising costs with building material, conflicts with scheduling, change orders? We know in the process of things, we see change orders all the time that go up. Are those calculated into these numbers? Because I'm thinking it's going to be much more.
Well, more and less at the same time. So remember that unfunded amount also includes the schools that we're going to build through the loan, so it lowers that amount. But you hit the nail on the head there. We are going to continue to see rising costs and those things, and our buildings aren't going to get younger. As they age, they cost more. So although this is a 5-year snippet, we have things happen, and I'm just going to throw this example out, is Horizon Academy is relatively one of our younger schools, right? So you wouldn't think that we would have the need to do anything at that school in regards to the HVAC system, but we had a valve that literally exploded in there, and we had to come back and do a couple of $1 million worth of work. So those surprises will always catch us off guard and always add to that unfunded amount, because it's going to draw out of the funded those projects that we think we can get to, but now they go unfunded because we've had a incident or a situation at a school that requires an emergency maintenance item.
So we're always going to be, it looks like we're always going to be behind, but we have to figure out some more revenue, and I think everybody has said it, revenue sources other than what we're looking at. And if the impact fees don't go through, we're really going to be in bad shape, from what I'm seeing.
Yes, sir, we are. And that is my concern, is without the impact fee, it's not going to pay for the debt service, which then is going to take away from any future maintenance plans. And it's huge.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Dobbins. I think this is my 5th year on the school board and my 5th year hearing the 5-year facilities work plan. And the difference is that we are at even more of a critical juncture now because we're taking so much action. We're taking the long loose bull by the horns. I remember conversations years ago about consolidating Anthony and Spar. opportunities for Fessenden that a large portion of the community did not consider opportunity at all. So it's important to acknowledge that this is nothing new, but the buzzard is coming home to roost. And I think that this board has done a very dynamic job, and our superintendent and many others, to really start to make that clear to the community, that it is very much now the time, if we want the A++ district that we all want, need, and expect. We're putting all the work in, so it's time to prioritize education in Marion County, you know? A $5 million school just to get it done, and it was temporary, kids are still there. You know, that's a recurring theme. This school was supposed to be condemned, which was the justification to build the Taj Mahal out on Mary Camp Road. Beautiful school, and money was plentiful then. But then it wasn't, and now here we are. And there's kids here again. So at some point, you got to take the bull by the horns and have the courage to have the conversations with the community, to really include the community. And we're doing that by presenting the need across many spaces. I am so glad that our, Teresa Boston-Ellis, our CFO, and Dr. Gullett have been going out to the community groups. I applaud Dr. James. This is a district that has kind of always just been out there, rural, some might say somewhat overlooked, but not really, because there's so much heart, It's where I started my career. So these conversations, while they might not be easy to have, and in some ways they're really great to have, because it's finally acknowledging what's been in the room, the whole time. But I think now what I would be asking for as a school board member is not just community acknowledgement. It's been termed as an emergency. Community acknowledgement that we are at a critical juncture with Marion County Public Schools. And if there ever was a time to really join us in supporting everything that we're trying to do to achieve that goal of an A+ and services that match the flourishing that we see in this community in so many ways, now's the time. I'm sad that we lost the Reddick Gym, for example. I mean, there was a lot of history out there and beauty, but it had been for many, many reasons, mostly money and will, for so long that we don't have it anymore. And that was a very historic space. So I look forward to these continued conversations, and while they may be termed as tough, it is what it is. and the more we share that, and the more we know there's so much support in this community for our schools, because so many people are here that graduated from our high schools. We've had so much support for our funding referendums in the past. The last one passed in every single precinct. To me, that shows that this community really is willing to be supportive, really is willing to do what we're sharing that it takes, as long as we continue to convey the need and the partnership, and that's what makes a strong community. Strong schools, strong community. So I thank you again, for coming back this year. And sometimes you have to hear something 3 or 4 different ways, 4 or 5 different times, and then the atmosphere just sort of lines up, and the right people are in the right places for the right reasons at the right time, and then it's like, oh yeah, of course we need to do this, and off it goes. So I look forward to that part.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Reverend Cummings.
As Vice Chair Thor was just talking, it's almost something I've seen coming onto the board oftentimes I would talk to teachers and educators and people around the district, and one of the things that they would say is they expect us to do more with less. Well, I'm kind of hearing that's been the overall mindset of not just teachers, educators, but this district, because we've been doing more with less, and we haven't told our stories. We didn't get the impact fees for 12 years, and now it's time to tell our story. We can't keep doing more with less, because if we it's going to break. The system is going to break. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because this is us telling our story, just putting it out there, hey, we can't keep doing more with the little bit that we're getting. And I agree with Vice Chair Thoreau. I think this community is ready to, and has been, the last election showed that they are ready to invest in education. They have been investing in education. And because we cannot get the outcomes, all of the outcomes that we so desire for Marion County public schools without proper investment. So Ms. Dobbins, thank you and the team for this wonderful presentation. I think, Superintendent, that more people need to see it. I think we need to, I'm not one of those people that like to beg, and I don't think we have to beg. I think we just need to put it out there and let folk know what we need, and folk will rise to the occasion and come to the needs.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this item? Any public comment on this item? Seeing and hearing none, thank you, Ms. Dobbins, for your presentation. If you needed consensus from us, I believe you have it. Do you need that from us?
You'll see this as board action on the second formal meeting of the board in September.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. Okay, I had said we would be breaking for lunch at 12 o'clock. It's up to you, Mr. McFadden, if you think you can get through your presentation in 10 minutes.
That's great.
I would prefer to just keep trucking, but that's just me as one board member.
Okay. Board, what is your pleasure?
I want to make sure that we get the whole presentation. If we're going to break at 12, let's break now and come back. But I want to make sure that we give due time to this presentation, school safety. So
I don't disagree with that. We said we were going to break at 12, so maybe we could start and then take a break.
Okay. All right, very good.
At least get the ball rolling.
Let's see how far we can get.
Yes, ma'am. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for allowing me to at least start the presentation. It won't be long. It's something we do every year. This is the Florida Safe Schools Assessment Tool, and basically what this is, it is the assessment that the principals, the school staff, and the safe school staff do every year to make sure that we are documenting all of the critical infrastructure of all of our schools throughout the district, to include our charter schools. This is a confidential document. There is so much vital information in there that we do not share it with people. We do not make copies of it to share it, and just in case it gets in the wrong hands, because of, again, the amount of information that is in there that gives intricate details of all of our schools and some of the needs that they may have. This is not working. Did I do something?
You're currently in the special school board meeting. If you can get back out to the work session instead, I'm not sure. We're having technical difficulties.
to see if
Yes, it's attached in board docs.
We're gonna have to go to board docs together.
Shall we just break from
I know. Okay. With that, I believe we're going to go ahead and take our break. So I'm sorry, Mr. McFadden, that we've had some technical difficulties here. But whenever we come back at 12:30, potentially even a few minutes before, then we will start right off with your presentation and have it available for the public to see.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you. Breaking at 11:54 a.m. Coming back out of recess at 12:34 p.m. Thank you for your patience. Mr. McFadden, I know we had just started with an introduction of you to get us going, and now we have the presentation available for all the community to see as well. So, welcome, Mr. McFadden.
Thank you, and good afternoon to each of you. We are here today to give you an update on our 23-24 Florida Safe Schools Assessment Tool. This is the mandatory tool that has to be used by all districts across the state of Florida, and so we are here to give you some updates on it. Again, as is achieve 2026 goals, this falls upon the goal 2, but just like most of our other folks that'll come up and talk to you, we kind of cover all of those. Even though there's a responsibility for the safe and positive learning and working environment, we still think about kids first. We still think about the financial aspect of it. So we kind of touch all of those goals. But again, the Florida Safe Schools Assessment Tool is mandated by the state of Florida to be used by all districts, not just for schools, but all of our properties. And we even take it a step further. Not only do we do our schools, but we do CERMI and New Leaf as well as all of our charter schools, because we have a direct contact with them being part of the school system. Information contained in the FSAT is confidential and it's exempt from public records, so no one can come and ask for a public records request of it because there's so much critical information in there. It talks about all of our vulnerabilities, our safety and security concerns, so we keep the information pretty tight and under wraps so that we don't share with anybody. The law requires that by October 1st of each year, we are to come before you as a board after we've discussed and shared these recommendations with Dr. Gullett and her team to provide you with this information so that you can help make recommendations or make recommendations as needed when it comes to safety and security. So this is our school board properties. As you're aware, we've got 29 elementary schools, 8 middle schools, 8 high schools, 2 combination schools, the Adult Technical Education Center, Early Learning Academy, and an Exceptional Education Center, along with our other district offices. So physical security recommendations. These are the recommendations that we're putting before you now. A lot of these recommendations have already been started, and a lot of them are complete, or we're always working on them. But we have cameras in all of our schools now, and as you're aware, we're going to go back and add some more just for better coverage. Door buzzers, they're in all of our schools, but some schools we may have to add a couple more because of the unique setup of their schools. Fences, again, it's a never-ending process that we go through. Even though we got fences put up at all of our schools, we're always going back trying to find ways to improve, to make sure that we create that single point of entry so that no one can get on the campus in another way. Or storefront locks are something that we haven't started yet, but basically what storefront locks are is when you unlock your door, you can't unlock it to the point to where it's completely unlocked. What we see sometimes when we go out and do our drills is we still have teachers just not confident that the door is locked, so they open the door and actually check to see if the door is locked. Storefront locks will eliminate that because the door will remain locked at all times. It's just one of the things that we're looking at. 383 lock replacements. This is going to be a district-wide project. Right now, I've been here for 7 years. We've had 383 keys for as long as I've been here and probably beyond. So we're going to go through the process of making each school their own unique exterior locking on their own locking mechanism, to where Vanguard keys won't fit at Forest fences on the outside, and Forest won't fit at North Marion. It makes each school unique so that we don't have unwanted guests on the campuses. Knox boxes is something that has again come up, and I can get into these here more as we go through the program, but Knox boxes is something that we are going to put on each of our school buildings. We have some for the fire department, but we got to get additionals for our law enforcement personnel. Bidirectional amplifiers, better known as BDAs, they may be needed in some schools. We were under the impression at first that we had to get them in every single school, but with some new technology that we've come across, but we're working with the county, we won't need to have BDAs in every school. Radios for our buses, as well as safe school staff, and electronic key card access. So again, our cameras, we're going to look to add cameras to all of our front doors. This is a complement to the door buzzers. Right now, you can, when somebody mashes that buzzer, in most of the schools, you can actually see them on the camera, but we got to go back and do that for all the schools so that you can actually physically see the person as they're standing at the door. And the projected cost of that is going to be about $236,000, and we're looking at that being about a 2-year project. Door buzzers, we only got, like I say, a couple more to put in as we move to install some at some selected sites, plus our after-school programs, our Marion after-school program. Again, even though we don't have SROs on the campus after a certain time, we still want to do what we have to do to protect our after-school program. So that projected cost is roughly $93,000, and we're looking at that to be a 1-year project. Fencing upgrades, again, this is going to be a continuous, ongoing maintenance on these fences, because we're finding that even the brand new security fencing that we're putting up, the hinges are being wore out. Unfortunately, kids swing on them. They do all kind of stuff, and a lot of these fences, they're just not holding up like we want them to. So we project that yearly cost for maintaining these to make sure they're in working order is roughly $500,000. 3M film, this is very new to us. I shouldn't say new as in knowledge, but new to the district as something that we put on our list of making sure we get them as a priority. We had recently a donor that approached the district, spoke with Dr. Gullett, Lauren Debick, and Ms. Megan Magamal, and they donated $200,000. Very nice people. They wanted us to use this funding for whatever security needs we thought best for the district, and we came up with the 3M film after we saw the incident over in Tennessee where the lady shot out the glass window and walked through the door. We were going to use this 3M film to put on the front of our school buildings, the doors, and maybe some of the first floor windows so that someone can't have easy access to the school. So this was a gracious donation by this family, and we appreciate that. And as we're standing here talking, we are already starting to get that 3M film on some of these schools. We just got to work out the logistics whenever we've got them approved as vendors, and they're getting ready to start putting this 3M film on the schools. Again, storefront locks, this is going to be a big cost. Again, this is a long-term project, and depending on as far as the storefront locks, a lot of that may have to be done by an outside vendor because we just don't have the labor force within the district to change out, install these storefront locks at all the schools. Again, that's a project that we're looking at. It's a long-term project, but right now we're looking at other options, but it's one of the options that we're thinking about. Again, the 383 lock replacement, we thought this was going to be a huge cost, and I say not huge compared to other projects, but it's roughly going to be $30,000 for us to get all the keys made for all the different facilities we got, not just our schools, but for the main bus transportation. It will no longer be under a 383 key. And what we'll do is provide certain people with the key to all of those buildings, such as myself, our safe school staff, tech services, facilities, just certain people will have keys to everything. But again, we wouldn't have Vanguard with keys to be able to access Forest or vice versa. Knox boxes. This is rather unique, and we're going to go more into detail with this here. So Knox Box is a company. The company is actually Knox. And what we learned is that when we have a situation where law enforcement has to come onto the campus, we teach our staff during an active assailant event to lock down, secure themselves, and not to come out of those secure locations. But in this case, if they do that and the SRO on campus is engaging the threat, how does other law enforcement officers get in the building? And we struggled with that for a long time, and now the answer to it, the only solution we have is putting these knock boxes on the outside of our building. They're bolted to the building. There's a special key that's will only be made specifically for Marion County. The Knox box key for Marion County won't fit in no other key in the country. It'll only be for Marion County. So what we have to do is provide a key to responding deputies or police officers that are in the area. They'll all get a key, and if something happens at a school site, they will have access to our schools without our staff coming out of their secure locations to open the door for them, because that's what was happening at Forest High School. Our staff was actually coming out of their secure location, opening the door. Bidirectional amplifiers, BDAs, we're going to install them as needed at selected sites. What we've done is we had some radios that we're getting ready to purchase, and we went around to all the different schools to make sure these radios were working. Again, this is a project that we've been working with Marion County, and I think I told you once before, we're the only entity in Marion County that's not on the 800 megahertz system. And that was very concerning to myself, Dr. Gullett, as we talked about this here, and the question was why? Why aren't we? And so we've been talking and having a lot of conversations with the county, and they have extended this opportunity to us to get us on this 800 megahertz system. And what this allows us to do, especially our bus drivers, is to talk directly to fire or law enforcement dispatch in the event of an emergency. Right now, the radios that they use has to be, is connected to the main transportation, who in turn calls law enforcement, and it's all about time and seconds count. So these particular radio systems that we have, we're getting ready to purchase, will connect directly to law enforcement from the bus standpoint. But from a school standpoint, we are working with our technology department along with, again, the county to open up, I guess you could say, the airways to allow these radios to hook up to the Wi-Fi, LTE, as well as cell towers. They got 3 modes of ways to connect when they get onto a school campus. So as soon as a law enforcement officer walks onto the school campus, it automatically finds the strongest signal strength, connects to that so that they get the best communication. Because back in Parkland, there was a real miscommunication, a lack of communication, I should say, where the officers couldn't get out after the shooting. And so this is what we're trying to do to rectify that situation with these radios. And these are the radios that we're talking about. This is what they call a mobile or base model that will go in the buses, or either in the stationary offices for the bus supervisors, and they can hear radio communication and traffic all over Marion County. We'll have our own dedicated channels to go back and forth and talk. Our bus drivers can talk back and forth to each other to their main dispatch, but if they needed to in an emergency, they can actually hit that, it's usually red, but it looks orange there, but hit that button or connect to the dispatch, and when they hit that button, it will override everything, and the traffic will be, everybody else's traffic will stop, allow this person who is in the emergency situation to connect directly to law enforcement, and I couldn't come in and talk over them with my radio. It allows them to be the main focus and the main person that's doing all the talking during this here critical incident. So that's going to cost us roughly $2.4 million. But as we was talking about purchasing BDAs, to purchase BDAs in every school, as we were looking at, that was going to be roughly $3.8 million. So we're looking at a cost savings there, but we're also getting better communication with these new radios. And this is the big thing here, access control. And access control is really just security measures put in place that limit access to certain locations within a building, classroom, or other areas, such as fences, doors, gates, keys, signs. But what we need to focus on is electronic key cards. This is something that when you go to other districts, this is common in other districts. Unfortunately, it's not common here. We have been, like with everything else, our buildings, our capital, we've been kind of kicking the can down the road, past boards, past administrations, and it's kind of put us in a situation where we're behind, but we're trying to quickly catch up. We're not able to give you a price or cost on any of this here because they have to do so much behind the scenes work to try to come up with what it would actually cost. So this, I could get this to you at a later time, but there's a lot of work behind what it would actually cost. Now, moving forward, as we build new schools and new facilities, this has to be built into it. It is so much cheaper to build this into it as you're building than to go back and try to retrofit any of this into your schools, because they're not designed for it. When we build these schools, they're just not designed for this type of functionality. But as we move forward, we have to put this kind of technology in our schools from the very start. It's a lot cheaper, and it's just the way it goes. It keeps us, these electronic key cards, if somebody fails to turn in a key card whenever they retire or get fired or something, you just simply cut it off. You just simply cut it off. It keeps me from picking up the phone, calling them people and asking for it. We would probably still ask for that key, but it don't put us in a situation where it's a security breach, because we can just simply turn off the card. With these cards, we can also allow access to certain people during certain times of the day or the hours. Obviously, I would have 24/7 access, tech services and other administrators, but for the most part, we can limit who has access to those campuses during a certain time. These won't be for students. Won't be for students. Students won't have access cards. Again, these are just a different kind, but most of the time they're just a swipe, or you put the key up to it and it just opens up. Again, the projected cost, we have to do a complete scope of work on it, so we can't give you that cost at this time. So from a Safe Schools Department, what we do annually, we get together, and throughout the year, we just get together, we sit down in a room, and we start thinking of putting things into perspective, priorities. We do consider funding and what we have. Well, we try to do the best we can to make sure that we provide the district with the security measures that's going to best protect our students, staff, and visitors. So this is what our priority projects are as of right now. Install additional cameras at all of our schools. Install additional door buzzers for unique situations. We've got some schools that need more than one door buzzer, and we're working with those staff members to get that done. Upgrade and repair fences to ensure a single point of entry. Again, there are some schools that the fences, when we start walking them, they may have breaches in them and holes or whatever, and we fix them immediately as soon as we find out about them. But we had a situation where we sometimes don't like to tie into a business, an existing business that's beside us, and they may not take care of their fencing, so it keeps us from making repairs to their fence. So we just simply say, can we just put up a fence? And that way we're able to do the repairs on the fence rather than waiting on them to do it. Install the 3M film to select the sites. Again, that is happening right now, and we're getting ready to make that. You'll start seeing this 3M film going up on some of our schools. Develop a long-term plan to install storefront locks. Again, this is a long-term plan, and when we start doing this here, it may require us to have a third-party vendor, some outside vendor to do that. We just don't have the infrastructure internally to do that right now. We're going to replace all 383 locks with site-specific locks. We've already got the quote. Again, behind the scenes, tech services is working on that, and you should start seeing them shortly. Install the Knox boxes. We got to buy both law enforcement and fire department Knox boxes, because law enforcement, fire department don't want law enforcement having access to their box, and vice versa. So we have to buy 2 boxes, and we're getting ready to purchase those. I've actually got the keys came in last week for those. The purchase of the 800 megahertz radios for selected staff and vehicles. We're working with purchasing. We've got the contract that's been reviewed by legal and our purchasing department. They just sent it back to me. It should be on the board for approval for the September 25th board meeting, I believe, for the radio purchases. And then develop a district-wide plan for electronic key cards. Again, that is something that we really need to start doing from a district-wide standpoint, because we're making so many keys. So many people want access or need access to the buildings and the facilities. Just making these keys, all it takes is one key to get lost, and our whole system could be put in jeopardy. So we really need to start looking at some type of plan for some electronic key cards. Again, this is just some recommendations to secure the district offices. Even though schools are our focal point, we're kind of at the point where we're getting close to getting things what we need at the schools, but we really have to start talking about our district offices. We have people just random people walking into our buildings, now our district offices where we still have staff at, and we just need to start getting some work done on those district offices. We've had the catalytic converter thefts. They went on to someone cut into the fence and started cutting catalytic converters off of our main transportation. So we want to start, again, putting security measures in place for that. Cameras, whatever it takes to start securing our facilities a little bit better. So I've got to submit and have everything done by October 1st. Everything that all of this FSAT, my staff will get it and actually review every school-based FSAT as well as the district FSAT. And once we review everything, this is what we have to do. Make recommendations to the board through the superintendent. This is what we're doing today. Identify strategies and activities to implement recommendations. How are we going to implement these recommendations if y'all approve them? I'll request board approval to accept recommendations. Again, it'll come to you on September 25th for the board approval. Once that is done, I have to complete section 10.1 of this FSAT and submit it to the state, and then report findings and school board action to the Office of Safe Schools within 30 days after the school board meeting, but no later than November 1st. So these are just the actions that I have to take after we leave here. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. McFadden. I want to thank you again for accelerating the pace. We've had a lot of conversation the last few years, and Board, I think you know we had a lot of ground to make up with hardening schools, but I also want to talk very briefly about safety being everyone's responsibility as well, right? It's not just safe schools. It's all of us. It's all of us, the training, the paying attention to the details, and if you see something, say something, right? But appreciate the team's work in accelerating, even just with the key cards. We've had a lot of conversations. Some may think that some of these are expensive and may not be necessary, but we have to do everything that we can that is grounded in research and statistics. Unfortunately, some of those statistics come from very terrible circumstances where we can learn and do better here in Marion County. And I wrote the word immediate down, Mr. McFadden, when you were talking this time, for example, like the key cards. Those who are not familiar with key cards that I've used for years, you could immediately lock down a building. If there's an employee or someone there with a card, you can eliminate their access immediately. A key doesn't do that. And I know Mr. McFadden spoke about the badges and things, but when you have your ID and you can swipe it, you can change it instantly. So we have to be more agile and more diligent in how we all function. And I think Vice Chair Thrower, you talked about this earlier this morning, even about things have changed, right, and access. And unfortunately they have, but it is our responsibility to change with the times and to ensure that we're providing a safe campus for all students and all employees and all visitors. So thank you for your work, and we look forward to any questions and comments you have, Board.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett, and thank you, Mr. McFadden. Board, questions, comments? Dr. James.
Sorry, I was muted, so if I coughed. I wanted to just point out one of the things Mr. McFadden said is when we're talking about the new schools. And when we toured, all of every school we toured had some variation of a key card. Basically, it's budget dependent. It's an item that is completely driven by how much money you have or don't have. The conversation that the team had was that regardless of whether we can afford to do key card entry throughout a whole school or not, we want to entertain the idea of wiring it so that we could eventually key card it, because that is the easy thing to do in the beginning that isn't incredibly cost significant. And then later on, when our money tree blooms, we could go back and add key cards. So I just wanted the board to know that is a conversation that we've had. The team and Ms. Dobbins and her entire department, they have a budget for these schools, and key card entry is not necessarily in the budget for the schools, but wiring for further key card entry is definitely possible.
Thank you, Dr. James. That's a very solid point. I think we need to ensure that we're doing that even for the wings as we're adding on to schools. Any new construction, and I'm see Dr. Gullett shaking her head, I'm sure that's probably a part of the plan, but wiring is the cost prohibitive piece in an existing structure that has been there for a really long time and doesn't have the capability, potentially even in their electrical grid, to do what would be needed. So thank you for that point, Dr. James. Additional comments, Board, Vice Chair?
Just thank you, as always, to you and your team. This isn't becoming less comprehensive, it's becoming more comprehensive. And so again, the partnering with the community, all of our different law enforcement agencies, our SROs, everyone that's involved with this, which is all of us. That's what's going to make the difference. And I so appreciate Dr. James about the comment of being proactive, with construction and having the wiring in there. I think maybe all of us have seen HDTV, and it's always the big cliffhanger and heartbreak when they have to replace wiring in an old house and bring it up to code, so to speak. So if we can be proactive on that, and it sounds like we're going to be, then that's certainly a very smart way to go. So thanks for everything.
Yes, ma'am. And I have to say, listen, board, this has been amazing. The board, this administration, Dr. Gullett, again, 2-3 years ago, we were not in this position. We were kind of struggling with this school security thing. When Dr. Gullett first got here, we had an extensive conversations, and I knew, as they say, I knew the assignment. I knew what she meant when she said, we have to get this thing moving quicker. And thanks again to this entire team, whether, Ms. Boston Ellis, Ms. Dobbins. I just hate to name people because everybody had such a great part in it and getting this to make sure it was done right. Thanking my team. They're just absolutely great. And the work that they're doing and just the work as a district. We've come a long ways in the last 2 or 3 years that I didn't see things happening and progressing this fast.
Thank you, Mr. McFadden.
I just want to say, I'm sorry. I just want to say thank you, Mr. McFadden. Always, you know where I am with the safety piece. And all of us are in the same place. We know that if the schools aren't safe, the atmosphere for learning is not going to be there, or the atmosphere to even work at a school if there's no safety protocols. So thank you for that. And we look forward to the new schools coming online and then making sure that we're able to be ahead of the game, so to speak, with our safety protocols. So thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Cummings, and thank you again, Mr. McFadden. Just a handful of comments. So first thing, I was hearing you talk about storefront locks, and I was thinking, okay, but let's talk electronic key cards. So like the first couple of slides were all about storefront locks or so, and then I'm like, okay, so where's the electronic key cards? And obviously that's a part of the plan too. But we also need to plan for the understanding that we won't always potentially even have electric. So, I mean, let's just say that in a storm, something happens, electronic key card we're still gonna need to have a physical key. And so I can see why that storefront lock then, where one key gets into Vanguard, one key gets into Westport or whatever that is, I can see the value of the analog and the digital. And so we need to have both working in tandem. Also, extremely glad we're working on the 800 megahertz because that's vitally important for the safety of everybody so that we're all working together. The only comment that I really wanted to make, and it's probably just a function of the photograph that you chose, and I'm not going to call out a particular department or a particular location, but whenever we're talking about cameras at front entrances, specifically on slide 13, just wanting to ensure that before we go into a very expensive purchase on something with a very high price tag, that we also are looking at the long-term positioning of particular departments, long-term positioning of if we will continue to have that downtown space in the next 5 to 10 years. The answer is most likely yes. But I'm just looking at the specific picture you chose on slide 13. And it's not to say that they don't need them also and that they don't need safety and security. That's not what I'm trying to say. But as we forecast long-range strategy for all of our district offices, all of where we're going to be, and potentially divesting ourselves of properties in the future, which most likely is going to occur, we're going to have a data center come online in the next year to 2 years, and so that's going to change that need. We also know with central warehouse is going away, we're going to potentially divest that property. I know we'll be strategic, but just that one picture just threw me off to say, okay, well, we need to make sure we have a long-term plan as to, is that department going to actually be in that building for all the time that they're going to be there? That's the only comment I wanted to make on that.
Definitely.
And I know there will be long-term, but that one it threw me off. But yeah, that's really all I had. Those Knox boxes are going to be a huge asset from a safety standpoint. And all the fencing, again, it just further validates the justification for us to build the replacement Lake Weir Middle School because of the cost it is to fence the existing Lake Weir Middle School. And to put in the dollars in a campus, granted, they need it, but I'm just using that as an example. We have to be careful and cautious where we're being and judicious with our resources. And it just further speaks to what we've been having conversation about all day today, that this is not a money tree, as Dr. James kind of alluded to. As soon as our money tree starts blossoming, we have to be strategic in how we're making these. I'm super grateful that the referendum was approved again, and I know the new referendum committee will be meeting in October for the first time for this next 4 years of referendum, and that safety and security is a part of that referendum. So we do have some dollars available to us, thanks to the taxpayers of Marion County, that we would not have had if we did not have the referendum. So super grateful for that. But this need is great, and you've done a great job putting a plan together to help us meet the need. So thank you so much.
And we continue to look forward to working with the board, this administration staff here, Dr. Gullett and her team. It's a lot of conversations going on that people just don't realize that's happening to make everything come together. It's all a plan, but it's coming together. So thank y'all.
Mr. McFadden, I do have a question, because sometimes I don't think people really, and you may not know the answer right off the bat, but approximately how many square feet of in this district are you having to secure? You'll get back to me. I asked that because people.
I know there's 7 million square feet.
7 million square feet.
Sometimes people don't understand how big a project this is of securing our schools. 7 million square feet.
Well, that's interior square feet.
Interior,
Because
yeah.
you're also talking about school properties
Correct.
that are
Correct.
surrounding it, that is also a security issue.
Correct. So I sometimes I think when they say, they think maybe just one building and one school, but we have a lot of stuff that he's securing in safe schools. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Folks have conversations all the time, and they think we're in northern states where schools are built up in one building, and we have vendors may call us and even ask, they want to sell us a product, and they're thinking we have 2 or 3 schools, not realizing the way the state of Florida is set up, the county is the district, and so when I tell them we've got 50-plus schools or 60-some buildings, they're just in like sticker shock because they're thinking we're going to spend $1 million to do something, but when I tell them it could be 25 million or 30 million, usually not a long conversation.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. McFadden. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing and hearing none. With that, I believe that closes our agenda for today. Does any board member or anyone sitting at the dais, we've been here for a while, y'all, anybody have anything else? All minds and hearts clear? Dr. Gullett.
I would thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. If you would just be patient with me for a moment. There are a couple comments I wanted to make. Sure. Reflecting on the day and the conversations, we started with our academic performance, right? And we moved into facilities and safe schools. I can't take credit because we didn't do this by design, but the connectedness of those pieces is important to talk about, right? To ensure that we're meeting student outcome targets, we need to have facilities that are adequate and safe and conducive for learning and working. So I just think that's important to talk about. I am grateful to this board I made some notes earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt the flow of your conversation, but the passion that I hear, the commitment to prioritizing education is so critical. When you talk about attendance, we can't teach them if we don't have them. And life skills comes to mind, right? In a job, when we talk about students attending school, if you said, well, I'm only going to be out 2 days this month and I'll be out 2 days next month, you can't do that on the job site, right? Your employer is going to wonder about your commitment to doing your work if there's always a way out. And so I think there's a connection there that we are working to try to articulate to our community at large. We are kicking off this month attendance awareness, but it doesn't end in September, because it's important for everyone to understand it takes all of us together to ensure students are successful, not just at school, but when they leave us. And looking at these patterns, I'm incredibly grateful, and you all have mentioned this also, to our schools, their teams. When you show up on campus and they have a board there welcoming students and saying, you know, the attendance rate and all of the ways, and I know Dr. James spoke about this earlier, all the ways that the schools teams are being creative to reinforce and reach everyone. I was talking yesterday on a campus with a family engagement liaison, and calling those families and speaking with them and really building relationship is very, very powerful. And I'll end with this. The conversation about facilities and financing education. I said to a principal group yesterday that I hope that the legacy that I as a superintendent leave and that this board leaves Marion County in the future is a commitment to doing what's best for students, having the tough conversation and being unapologetic is my new word. I know some of you have heard me say this a lot publicly, unapologetic about doing what's best for our students, even when it's the most difficult thing for the adults. So I'm incredibly proud of the work that we're doing to prioritize our students and having the tough conversations that nobody wonders 20 years from now, why didn't anyone have those conversations and ask those tough questions? I don't want that to be my legacy, and I feel confident in saying I don't think this board wants that to be their legacy. So I'll leave that alone, and thank you for your support.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gullett. Anybody else have anything to share? Vice Chair Thrower.
Thank you, and I'll make this quick because we've certainly covered a lot of ground today, but our next meeting, just to confirm, is our school board meeting on Tuesday, September 12th.
We actually have a meeting tomorrow evening at 5:01.
Oh, that's right, okay.
So tomorrow evening.
That's our special one.
That's
okay.
our special
But our next regular school board meeting.
Yes,
okay.
next regular school board meeting will be next Tuesday, the 12th. But please, I hope to see you all here tomorrow evening at 5:01, perhaps dressed in football gear or whatever we're going to head to the fields after that. But yes, 5:01 tomorrow evening.
Right, and I know that's historically and traditionally quite a short meeting. And as far as the one on September 12th, I just wanted to share quickly that I was at the County Commissioners meeting yesterday, and the impact fee ordinance was discussed. And so I would encourage all of you to just watch that. The video is available, and then we can discuss it at our board comments on the conclusion of our regular board meeting on the 12th. I will share that the county did sound to me like they committed to having 2 public hearings to address extraordinary circumstances. And the first one is September 20th at 8:30 a.m. And then the second one will be October 4th at 10 a.m. Those are the dates that I wrote down, so I hope they are correct. And I'm grateful that these meetings were scheduled yesterday during the conversation. To me, that really shows commitment at acknowledging our urgency at doing what's best for our kids. And so that's all I'm going to share about that today. Go ahead and just watch the video at your leisure, and we'll be able to discuss it then on the 12th.
Terrific. Thank you for that, Vice Chair. I have it pulled up, so I'll be watching it very shortly. Anything else? All right. With that, I believe we are concluding our meeting. So we will be adjourning our work session at 1:13 p.m. Thank you.